Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Chapter 01 The Pale Prince and the Platinum Dragon 1. Day 24 of the 8th moon of the year 100 after the conquest. Riverlands, Raventry Hall, home of House Blackwood. The Lord of Raventry Hall and head of House Blackwood, Roderick Blackwood, was a middle-aged man with hair as black as a raven's feathers and a pair of equally dark eyes. He was a handsome, mature man with a perfectly groomed beard and a hard, sharp jawline. At that moment, a look of helplessness reflected on Roderick's face. The source of his frustration stood before him. A teenager of about 13 who appeared taller than others his age, reaching 5 feet 7 inches, exceptionally tall for his years. However, it was his appearance that commanded the attention of anyone present. Silver hair fell below his eyes like a cascade of silver threads, paired with violet eyes and a face that was simply inhumanly beautiful. Unlike the innocence of other teenagers, he bore a serious expression and emanated an intense, powerful aura. Even standing still, all eyes were fixed on him. From head to toe, the teenager looked nothing like a Blackwood. On the contrary, he looked more like a Targaryen than all the other Targaryens combined. A pure-blooded Valyrian. Maekar, your father is summoning you within 2 moons. This time, he promised that if you do not appear, he will send your brother, Daemon, to bring you to King's Landing. Roderick spoke in a calm tone, though his expression revealed an even greater sense of helplessness in the face of the teenager's indifference. He wishes to see me after watching my mother die without even lifting a finger to visit her in her final moments. Maekar asked, subtle sarcasm impregnating his voice. There wasn't the slightest trace of respect in his tone when referring to his father, the Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Roderick's expression hardened at his nephew's words. He couldn't help but recall his own sister, Cassandra, whose involvement with Prince Baelon resulted in the young man now standing before him. It had been a scandal of grand proportions that shook the entire court. After all, whether it was Baelon or Cassandra, both were from important and powerful noble houses. If King Jaehaerys I had not legitimized Maekar, the image of the Spring Prince, Baelon Targaryen, would have been irremediably tarnished. Instead of contracting a new marriage, he had involved himself with a woman from an influential house and hadn't even publicly assumed responsibility for the act. The relationship between father and son, which was already poor to begin with, became even worse after the death of Cassandra Blackwood, caused by a plague that ravaged the Riverlands for a time. Changing the subject, how are we faring with our army? Maekar, unwilling to speak about his father, shifted the topic and asked in a calm tone. He didn't seem at all like a teenager of his age. The worry on Roderick's face softened. He leaned back in his chair and replied in a calm tone. However, the smile on his face was hard to hide. 35,000 soldiers. It was a number simply too high for any vassal, and far superior to the army of the Lord Paramount of House Blackwood himself, House Tully, the official ruler of the Riverlands. Maekar couldn't contain the smile on his lips. If anyone believed House Tully was strong, they were deeply mistaken. In the past or the future, House Tully had always been, and always would be, weak. House Targaryen had chosen the Tullys for exactly that reason, because they lacked the strength to rebel against the extremely powerful noble houses that surrounded them. It was a brilliant strategy by Aegon during the conquest. Not only did it prevent a powerful house from dominating the Riverlands, but it also drove a nail into the heart of the region, stifling any possibility of rebellion or treason. For this reason, noble houses that had once been kings in the Age of the 100 Kingdoms and the Age of Heroes, like House Blackwood, remained extremely powerful, in many aspects, more so than House Tully itself, which ruled the Riverlands. Under Maekar's influence, House Blackwood's strength had grown even further thanks to a series of reforms in the fiefdom. Mandatory training, combined with the offer of food, small amounts of money, and exemption from certain taxes, led countless young men and adults to accept the new laws without significant resistance. Roderick was also surprised by the army's growth in just 5 years. He never imagined that providing food, some money, and slightly reducing taxes could boost military power so significantly. The economy, in turn, had become more dynamic with the new laws and tax exemptions, filling House Blackwood's coffers. With more money in circulation, the people could consume more, and by spending, they caused the gold to return to House Blackwood's coffers, establishing a virtuous cycle of prosperity. The Lord of Raventry Hall looked at Maekar with an emotion difficult to control. If Maekar were king, he could see another Jaehaerys, strengthening the realm even further. Of that, He didn't have the slightest shadow of a doubt. Maekar was simply a prince born to be king. Roderick had personally seen how Maekar could convince people to accept vassalage with words and promises. If that wasn't a born king, he didn't know what was. Because of Maekar, it could be said that half of the Riverlands would now obey House Blackwood's orders. Although it was due to both Targaryen and Blackwood blood, as well as the contempt for House Tully, it was still simply shocking. Roderick presumed that, besides a dozen vassals, House Tully controlled a total of 10,000 soldiers. Yes, it was a large army, but compared to the other great noble houses, it was lamentably small. Even House Frey had more men than House Tully. That is good. If we continue this way, in 10 years we will have about 50,000 soldiers. Maekar also showed a satisfied expression. For an agricultural society like the Seven Kingdoms, that number was already quite shocking. If it weren't for the strangely long summers, it simply wouldn't be possible. Maekar looked at his uncle and spoke in a calm tone. However, that is not enough to make House Tully abdicate the title of Lord Paramount. Maekar, I know you want to make House Blackwood the lords of the Riverlands, but House Tully would rather die than suffer such humiliation. Besides, without the king's approval, that is an impossible goal. Roderick was not as optimistic about Maekar's plan. Maekar did not argue with his uncle's words. He also knew it was generally an impossible goal, but as the dance of the dragons drew closer, the impossible would become reality, especially if he possessed the largest and most powerful dragon still alive. Unfortunately, his uncle didn't know the future as he did, so he didn't have a clear overview of all the politics in Westeros at that moment. Especially with the Great Council of 101 AC happening the following year. However, Maekar simply couldn't say that, even if he claimed it was a dragon dream. How would someone who isn't a Targaryen believe in seeing the future through dreams? It doesn't matter, trying won't do any harm, Maekar said in a calm tone, which made Roderick smile gently. Even if you can't make House Blackwood rule the Riverlands, it doesn't matter, I am already satisfied with how far we've come. House Blackwood has never been as strong as it is at this moment, Roderick added, still smiling. For this nephew who had always helped despite his young age, Roderick felt more than just paternal love. He perhaps didn't love his own children as much as he loved Maekar. Don't feel pressured, you are the son of the future king of Westeros. You will receive a fief and marry a good woman in the future, Roderick said with a laugh, seeing Maekar's expression change from calm to annoyance. I'm not feeling pressured, old man, Maekar spoke in an annoyed tone and, without waiting for his uncle's response, simply left the Lord of Raventry Hall's private solar. Roderick shook his head and said nothing, though the teenager hid it well. How could he not notice that Maekar always seemed to be carrying an enormous burden on his shoulders? Although he didn't know what it was, he assumed it was something very serious. Cassandra, he is as stubborn as you. I can't imagine how much trouble he will bring. I never thought I'd miss your angry shouts. I miss you, sister. Roderick looked at the ceiling and murmured in a nostalgic tone, remembering the virtuous but equally powerful woman who had enchanted Prince Baelon, even after the death of his wife. Chapter 02 The Pale Prince and the Platinum Dragon 2. Maekar arrived at his room and sat in the chair behind a desk. He rested his chin on the palm of his hand and couldn't help but frown, thinking about the orders he had received from his father. Honestly, there was no love between him and Baelon. The man was known as the Spring Prince, but that warm and cozy sentiment was reserved only for his family. He, the result of a mere affair in a moment of weakness, was not considered family. Thus, the relationship between Baelon and Maekar consisted of an exchange of letters 3 times a year. He had never even set foot in King's Landing and was always raised at Raventry Hall by his mother and his uncle, who was more of a father than Baelon ever was. However, perhaps knowing he wouldn't survive, Maekar presumed that Baelon felt remorse and regret for his actions and wanted to facilitate a relationship between them at this time. But would a few months of conversation truly resolve 13 years of cold and indifferent letter exchanges? Maekar seriously doubted it, especially when Baelon hadn't even bothered to visit his mother or show the slightest respect at her funeral, something Maekar deeply resented. His mother had always wanted to see Baelon at the end of her life. Even in her final moments, she still murmured his name. Thinking of this, Maekar's face grew calm. He would not love Baelon, no matter what he did, but he could use this relationship to get what he had wanted for 13 years. Although he was considered a prince of House Targaryen because Jaehaerys had legitimized him, no dragon egg had been placed in his cradle, so he had no dragon. Knowing the future, How could Maekar ensure his safety without a dragon? However, he didn't want a dragon egg. He would tame an adult dragon to be considered a true chess player in this dangerous game. Releasing a sigh, Maekar couldn't help but recall the 13 years since he had arrived in this world. Originally, before getting involved in the kingdom's intrigues, he was a normal 16-year-old teenager on Earth. However, one day, he simply died. Without going into too much detail, he discovered a grand conspiracy involving squirrels. Squirrels that spied on him every minute of the day. In the end, when the squirrels discovered he understood their language, they showed no mercy. They tied him to the bed and killed him. Maekar still remembered the squirrel's last words. Lang lebe der Kaiser. The squirrel spoke in German. That was Maekar's last thought before being reborn as a baby in a world of dragons, wars, and death. However, not everything was bad. Despite being reborn as a baby in a fictional universe, he gained some passive abilities the moment he reincarnated. Though to this day, he was still confused about how he obtained such skills. They were: Eternal Arms Mastery, Rank A+, Mastery of Combat Arts has reached a level considered unparalleled in his era. By completely fusing mind, body, and technique, it is possible to utilize all fighting skills, even under the influence of any type of mental hindrance. Charisma, Rank A, the talent to command an army. It can be said he has achieved the highest popularity as a human being. His overwhelming charisma is incomparable to that of other mortals. It is so great that his majestic and elite armies worship him as a god and are willing to give their lives for him. Pure-blooded Valyrian descendant, A+, extremely high blood purity, granting numerous attributes. Fire magic affinity 200%, blood magic affinity 200%, flame resistance 200%, dragon affinity 200%, magic resistance 200%. With these passive abilities, Maekar was able to carry out his plans without much difficulty, especially with rank A charisma. This was a passive ability from Fate's Iskander, the pinnacle of charisma a human could possess. With this passive ability, Maekar became extremely adept at gaining admiration, reverence, and respect from others, especially from warriors and knights, who would die for him without any hesitation. If this were a normal medieval world, he presumed he would have conquered the entire continent by his 20s or 30s. I'll have to go to King's Landing. Seeing Daemon's arrogant face throughout the journey will be another form of torture, Maekar murmured in a calm tone. His relationship with both his brothers was complicated. Jaehaerys was kind and attentive. Daemon was the complete opposite, a true jerk of grand proportions. Maekar still remembered Daemon's words calling his mother a whore. He had never felt such rage in his life. Fortunately, Jaehaerys interrupted the argument, or Maekar truly would have pulled a dagger and driven it into Daemon's chest. After that, the relationship between Maekar and Daemon vanished completely. They did not consider each other brothers and became true enemies. Daemon, Daemon, Daemon. Maekar repeated Daemon's name a few times. His gaze couldn't be colder. He truly wanted to kill that arrogant and cruel bastard. However, it wasn't the right time, not to mention that Daemon had the powerful Caraxes as a bodyguard. The dragon might be smaller, but it was an adult dragon and the most violent of them all. Caraxes' prowess was such that, at the battle above the God's Eye, Caraxes would kill Vhagar, the largest dragon currently alive. Furthermore, like Aegon and Sunfire, the connection between Daemon and Caraxes was deep, such that the dragon itself would feel when its rider was struck. Maekar let out another sigh and couldn't help but think that things were truly complicated. Feeling a bit drowsy, he let out a groan of frustration and went to bed. He was still a teenager and needed sleep to grow, something he valued greatly. However, when he opened his eyes, he found himself on a hill. The green grass swayed with the wind, while a mist surrounded the environment. A lucid dream, that was Maekar's first thought, but he quickly dismissed the possibility. It was too real. He could even taste it in his mouth, smell the surrounding grass, and feel the slightly damp air against his skin. In the next moment, a scent reminiscent of sulfur hung in the air along with a hot wind. Raising his head, Maekar saw a pair of enormous golden eyes staring at him through the mist. The massive body was obscured by the surrounding fog. Maekar only heard the creature's majestic roar before waking up in bed. He sat up abruptly, breathing heavily. Running a hand through his sweaty hair, the 13-year-old had a wide smile on his lips. "It seems I'm the one who's been claimed," he said in a joking tone. It didn't take a genius to know he was dreaming of his future brother in arms. Originally, he thought he would claim Vermithor when Jaehaerys died, or even the cannibal, but it seemed the unknown dragon was linked to him before any other. Maekar didn't know how to describe what he was feeling, but he simply felt that the dragon was coming to him. It was a strange feeling, as if there were a heart in his hands and he could feel the yearning to find it. A feeling of longing that he was also experiencing now. It was like being incomplete, as if something important was missing. It was an extremely uncomfortable and irritating sensation. Getting out of bed, Maekar looked out the window and saw that the sun was already high in the sky, showing he had slept through the night. Without wasting any more time, he brushed his teeth with a paste made from a mixture of herbs and salt, using a toothbrush made from animal hair. This world might be medieval, but people prized hygiene. Only the commoners, who had to walk long distances to fetch water, struggled with bathing and maintaining hygiene. After all, when you're not even sure if you'll have your next meal, who cares about hygiene? After taking a cold bath, Maekar dressed quickly and left the room with an anxious expression, causing the servants and maids to look curiously at his figure running through the corridors. Maekar reached his uncle's room and, without any hesitation, pushed open the door. Ignoring his uncle's wife, who was naked in bed, he quickly woke the Lord of Raventry Hall. "Wake up quickly, you lecherous old man." Maekar ignored that his uncle was also naked and quickly shook his shoulders back and forth. Faced with Maekar, Roderick had to reluctantly open his eyes and looked at his nephew with annoyance. "You'd better have a good reason for waking me up, Maekar," Roderick said in a tone full of anger. No one would be happy to be woken up so abruptly. Roderick's wife also woke up and, seeing it was Maekar, didn't bother to cover her nudity. She looked at the teenager with a curious gaze as to what could make the calm and serious Maekar show such an anxious expression. "My dragon is coming. Go and order the saddle I commissioned to be brought to the courtyard." Maekar, who was prepared to tame an adult dragon, had naturally prepared the saddle a year prior. Roderick stood up abruptly. He grabbed his trousers and dressed quickly while glaring at Maekar. "Why didn't you say so sooner, you brat?" Maekar rolled his eyes and wasted no time, running toward the exit of House Blackwood's ancestral castle. He could feel the dragon getting closer and closer, as the feeling of longing and joy grew stronger and stronger. Chapter 03: The Pale Prince and the Platinum Dragon 3. Outside Raventry Hall, a group of dozens of people waited in silence. "Are you sure the dragon is coming?" Roderick, who had gotten out of bed far too early, asked in a slightly sleepy tone. He had been waiting for an hour, and there was still no sign of the dragon. "You can go back to the arms of your beautiful wife, uncle," Maekar replied impatiently. It was the 10th time Roderick had asked the same thing. He was like a child constantly asking if they were there yet during a long trip. Maekar wasn't a father, yet he was already having this terrible experience, and he wasn't enjoying it one bit. Roderick was simply being far too impatient. Suddenly, his heart began to beat extremely fast. Maekar raised his head and whispered with a smile. "It's coming." Maekar could feel it. The sensation was stronger than ever. If he reached out his hand, it felt as though he could touch his dragon. Though it was a whisper, Roderick heard it and looked up. Originally, he thought his nephew was delusional, but his gaze narrowed as he saw a small black dot on the horizon. The dot began to grow rapidly, and he saw something akin to a creature flapping its wings like a bird. Maekar was smiling, but his smile froze when he saw that the dragon didn't seem to be slowing down. It was accelerating even more toward him. Holy shit! Without any hesitation, Maekar began to run toward the open field. He felt that the dragon would truly collide with the castle. Before running, Maekar shouted to his uncle and sprinted with all his might. "Uncle, the dragon isn't going to slow down. To stop it from destroying the castle, I'm running to the meadow behind it." There was an excited smile on Maekar's lips. He truly felt like a normal teenager at that moment. Behind him, he could hear a majestic, long roar. Seeing his nephew running, Roderick's expression froze. Without hesitation, he made everyone run back into the castle. Witnessing Maekar's excited smile, Roderick couldn't help but be speechless, but there was also a smile on the Lord of Raventry Hall's face. It had been a long time since he had seen Maekar acting like a normal teenager. Maekar, having reached the meadow behind the castle, saw a massive shadow pass beneath him and looked up. Although the sun was in the way, the platinum scales with touches of gold reflected perfectly under the light. In the next moment, a loud crash echoed, and the earth seemed to tremble. Maekar managed to keep his balance and held his breath. It was a massive creature, 80 meters long with a wingspan of 220 meters, featuring 2 short hind legs and 2 large wings as forearms, with a hideous triangular face covered in scales. Atop its head, pale golden horns formed a majestic crown of menacing spikes. Along its spine, terrifyingly sharp points projected upward, looking especially fierce and intimidating. The enormous, strong, and muscular body displayed the prestige of the planet's greatest predator, a dragon. The massive dragon was covered in shimmering platinum-colored scales with golden hues at the edges, glowing with a metallic sheen similar to metal plates, yet unlike metal that could be pierced. The scales of adult dragons had the same hardness and resistance as Valyrian steel, making adult dragons true war machines. Photo of the dragon greater than. Its eyes blinked, the double eyelids revealing a pair of majestic and cold golden eyes. The dragon's gaze seemed to reflect Maekar's smiling face. Suddenly, the dragon's head lunged forward, gently nudging Maekar, causing him to stumble and fall to the ground. The dragon showed a humanized expression of disdain with a touch of sarcasm. Maekar was speechless at the dragon's petty personality. At the same time, he felt as though he had been claimed by the dragon and not the other way around, as it should be. For a moment, he felt like a Pokemon while the dragon was the trainer. "You have tamed a human, do you wish to name it?" Ignoring the strange thoughts in his mind, Maekar stood up with a calm expression. He approached the dragon and, without any hesitation, touched the massive creature's snout. The prince could feel the hot wind coming from the dragon's nostrils. The scent of sulfur, which should have been strong and extremely unpleasant, made his entire body feel comfortable. Looking at the beautiful creature before him, Maekar smiled. Although it wasn't Vermithor or the cannibal, it was an extremely large adult dragon and could grow even more before the dance of the dragons truly began. "You are beautiful, look at those platinum scales with a touch of gold. Is there a more beautiful and majestic dragon?" Using the voice one would use with a cat or dog, Maekar said with a smile as he touched the scales, which were warm to the touch. "Bahamut." Maekar chose the name with a smile. "Don't tarnish this name, or the dragon god of justice will be angry." Bahamut's response was to raise its head and open its mouth. A platinum flame with golden threads gushed out. The hot, fierce winds swept through the area, including Maekar himself, who was forced to step back a few paces. "It seems you like the name," Maekar said with a laugh. Now, he felt he could arrive in King's Landing with an entrance worthy of a true Targaryen. He wanted to see Jaehaerys' arrogant face when he saw Bahamut. The old man hadn't allowed an egg to be placed in his cradle, but he had still managed to get an extremely powerful, wild adult dragon. "Let's go to Raventry," Maekar said as he stroked the scales on the dragon's face. Although the dragon didn't know High Valyrian, being a wild dragon, the extraordinary bond between rider and dragon allowed it to understand Maekar's intentions. Bahamut took flight as it advanced toward the beautiful castle of House Blackwood. The gigantic platinum and gold creature flew through the sky as if it were a bird, shocking anyone with even a shred of biological knowledge. When Roderick saw Bahamut, his expression was one of surprise. He had expected a young, small dragon, but the monster before him was anything but young and small. He wondered how a beast of that size had gone unnoticed until now. As for the surprise of seeing a dragon, there was none. He had already seen other dragons like Silverwing and Vermithor, as well as Caraxes and Vhagar. During the processions of the Old King and the Good Queen, Raventry was a quite pleasant location, and the Queen enjoyed the fresh air of Raventry. Roderick looked at Bahamut and couldn't help but smile. From that moment on, Prince Maekar of House Targaryen was a dragon rider and was no longer someone even the king could ignore. He was a dragon rider mounting an adult dragon, a powerful dragon. "Are you sure he won't eat the servants trying to put the saddle on him?" Roderick asked Maekar, who was beside him. The teenager didn't take his eyes off the dragon, as if it would disappear if he blinked. "Don't worry, no one will die." Maekar was confident in his words. Bahamut had a somewhat cruel temperament, but he was quite approachable and loved being the center of attention. In other words, he was a narcissist who thought he was the most beautiful dragon. At Maekar's words, the servants gathered their courage and, surprisingly, the dragon was quite cooperative while they placed the saddle, secured around its neck by long cables, iron nets, and reinforced leather straps. The saddle Maekar had chosen was entirely red to match Vermithor or the cannibal, but it looked even better on Bahamut. The beautiful platinum and gold dragon looked very good with a red saddle. As for riding Bahamut without a saddle, sorry, Maekar wasn't stupid. He still found it hard to believe that Daenerys would truly dare to ride a dragon as large as Drogon without a proper saddle. The mere recoil when the dragon took flight should have sent Daenerys flying backward. Not to mention long-distance flights and the saddle's ability to help control the dragon during flight. It was simply insane to fly without any protection atop a giant dragon. He was always confused as to why the show's producers didn't put a saddle on Drogon. Roderick, seeing that the saddle was almost fully ready for the rider to mount, asked in a calm tone, "When are you leaving for King's Landing?" Today. Maekar didn't want to delay his departure for King's Landing any longer. He truly feared that if he lingered, Daemon, riding Caraxes, would arrive at any moment. He really didn't trust himself to hold back from driving a dagger into Daemon's heart. At the same time, he truly wanted to see King Jaehaerys, who didn't like him. In the old king's eyes, he was an uncontrollable element, just as Maekar had been, the man who had left the old king with severe trauma and extreme caution. Just imagining the king seeing his dragon made Maekar want to greet his grandfather with an innocent smile. Don't call him vindictive. When you're excluded from your own family because of a paranoid old man, you'd hold a grudge too. Take care, and remember that House Blackwood will always be your home. Roderick looked at the teenager before him and spoke in a gentle but solemn tone. I know, it was exactly because Roderick had treated him like a son that he wanted to strengthen House Blackwood. It was his way of saying thank you for all the care, education, food, clothing, money, and love he had received in these 13 years. Chapter 04 The King, the Queen, and the Prince 1. When Maekar settled into the saddle, the first thing he did was fasten the belt around his waist. The belt was secured by 4 thick iron chains attached to the saddle, designed to prevent the young prince from being thrown backward at the moment of takeoff. As soon as Maekar finished adjusting himself, Bahamut rose from the ground. The dragon's colossal body towered above the walls of Raventry. As he took a few steps forward, the ground gave way under his weight. His massive legs, capable of easily crushing several men lined up, moved with controlled force. Every movement of the dragon represented a risk to everyone around, a living weapon of war. Valyria had built its empire with dragons, fire magic, and blood, becoming not only the greatest but also the cruelest empire the world had ever known for 5,000 years. Sitting in the saddle, Maekar watched the dragon's long neck move and then looked down. For the first time, he understood what true power was. Not the political or military power he had helped Roderick build, but something truly powerful. It was said that the Targaryens did not submit to the laws of gods or men, and at that moment, Maekar fully believed it. Possessing a dragon was equivalent to holding a living weapon that was impossible to face. No human army could challenge a creature 80 meters long with a wingspan of over 200 meters. Sensing his rider's state of mind, Bahamut opened his jaws and let out a deep, menacing roar. Shortly after, he began to accelerate and, in a single movement, took flight. The impact was immediate. Maekar's body was abruptly pulled back, but the belt kept him firm in the saddle. As he looked around, the world below began to recede rapidly. With his hair fluttering in the wind, Maekar couldn't contain himself and opened his arms, savoring the absolute sense of freedom. The dragon moved through the air, gliding and occasionally flapping its wings. The movements were surprisingly agile and graceful. Suddenly, thinking of something, Maekar smiled and looked toward the fief of House Bracken of Stonehenge. Since House Bracken was an enemy of his uncle, he decided to teach a small lesson to those arrogant and easily irritable stupid stone horses. Sensing the rider's intent, the platinum-scaled dragon took on a cruel expression and tilted its body in the air, changing direction. As Stonehenge bordered the Blackwood lands, Maekar and Bahamut reached the location after about half an hour of flight. The castle appeared in his field of vision, followed by vast fields of green grass where dozens of horses grazed. Upon spotting the horses, Bahamut revealed a clear hunting instinct. Without hesitation, he tilted his body forward and began a rapid dive. Despite the high speed, the platinum and gold-scaled dragon captured one of the animals and tossed it into the air. In the next instant, a jet of platinum flames, interlaced with golden threads, erupted from his jaws, carbonizing the horse's body almost immediately. Then, Bahamut swallowed the remains in one gulp. The dragon repeated the attack, taking down 6 more horses before being satisfied. Although the animals tried to flee, the combination of flat terrain, wooden fences, and the dragon's presence made any escape impossible. Observing the few remaining horses, now in a panic, Maekar smiled and ordered Bahamut to resume flight toward King's Landing in the Crownlands. As for what Lord Bracken would do, Maekar didn't give it a second thought or have any intention of apologizing. Even if Lord Bracken went to the court of King's Landing to denounce him, Maekar wasn't worried. His dragon was wild, and he had just claimed it. He couldn't control the dragon completely, so it was perfectly normal for the dragon to be a bit uncontrollable. Maekar laughed and felt like a true problematic teenager at that moment. King's Landing, your true prince is coming, Maekar murmured with a smile. King's Landing, capital of the Seven Kingdoms. After Aegon crossed the sea riding Balerion, accompanied by his sister's wives, this was the spot where the conqueror landed. From a simple improvised wooden fort to a massive city with imposing walls in about 90 years. On Aegon's Hill, where Maekar built the House Targaryen castle, a massive red stone castle rose above the entire city. It was the Red Keep, the seat of House Targaryen and where the court met in the small council. At that moment, King's Landing received an unusual guest. A majestic and powerful roar caused people to look toward the sky and see a massive shadow passing through it. A fleeting platinum blur in the air. The city's calm was broken in an instant. Although they were used to seeing dragons, seeing an unknown dragon flying over the city was not good news. In the next moment, another dragon's roar sounded, and another figure was seen flying in the sky. Caraxes, a commoner shouted loudly upon seeing the dragon, easily recognizable by its red color and serpentine body. Daemon looked at the majestic platinum dragon in the air with a cold expression. Caraxes, without needing orders, moved through the air with simply shocking agility. The serpentine dragon's body was truly a masterpiece of nature. Bahamut, who was flying above the city, didn't like Caraxes' menacing roar one bit. The platinum dragon approached without hesitation. However, before he could do anything, he sensed Maekar's thoughts and let out a reluctant roar before turning away toward the hill next to Aegon's Hill. Seeing the dragon heading toward the dragon pit and a figure mounted on it, Daemon narrowed his eyes and knew it was a claimed dragon. As for who, he hadn't the slightest idea, but he would find out in a few moments. Caraxes followed the platinum dragon with its thin, elongated body. Nearby, on Aegon's Hill, another hill could be seen. A massive stone dome rose impressively. The dragon pit is a massive domed castle. The main gate consisted of massive doors, primarily of bronze with some iron, and was so wide that 30 knights could pass through it at once. There were also a dozen smaller entrances, some with oak and iron doors. The building's walls were thick and the roof strong. A massive dome was built over the pit. Stone benches were carved into the pit itself, which could accommodate 80,000 people. The outer region of the dragon pit received another guest, a massive dragon with platinum and gold scales. The dragon landed with a thud on the ground, kicking up some dust. The dragon's neck serpentined through the air and swept the surroundings with a cold, arrogant gaze. Suddenly, the dragon's attention was captured by the red dragon, landing shortly after. The two dragons roared at each other. And despite Bahamut being larger, Caraxes roared back. He showed no weakness even before Vhagar, let alone Bahamut. Maekar unfastened the belt from his waist and slid down Bahamut's wing membrane. Stroking the dragon's neck to calm him, he looked at the tall, handsome man sitting in Caraxes' saddle. "It's been some time, Daemon. I apologize for not attending your wedding, such a happy and sacred occasion," Maekar said in a calm tone, but anyone could hear the sarcasm in his voice. Daemon had married 3 years ago, in 97 AC, by order of Queen Alysanne, an attempt to calm Daemon's rebellious spirit, but the marriage failed miserably. Everyone already knew that Daemon despised his wife, Rhea Royce, or, as he called her, the Bronze Bitch. Daemon's eyes narrowed into a dangerous look. He smiled and dismounted from Caraxes with his hand on the hilt of his sword, a sword that once belonged to Visenya Targaryen, Aegon's wife, Maekar, Jaehaerys for a brief moment, and finally Daemon. It was Dark Sister, one of the 2 legendary swords of House Targaryen. "I thought I'd have to fetch you from the damp hole you call home, Maekar," Daemon said with a smile, though his smile was somewhat dangerous. "I'd probably vomit on you on purpose during the journey, so to maintain decorum between us, I came on my own," Maekar replied in a calm tone and didn't hide his dislike. Daemon didn't like him, and Maekar didn't like Daemon either. Knowing this, both sides didn't hide the sarcasm and antipathy they felt for each other. "I can see that," Daemon said in a cold tone, looking at the massive adult dragon behind Maekar. He had never seen such a dragon, but the dragon's origin didn't matter. Maekar had become a dragon rider, despite Jaehaerys' secret orders to prevent it. Thus, there was no dragon egg in Maekar's cradle, and the teenager couldn't reach Dragonstone. "Worthy of being the son of the woman who seduced my father, even the dragon is dazzling." Daemon couldn't help but smile, showing his impeccably white teeth. His purple eyes stared at the teenager with a sarcastic and even cruel look. Maekar's eyes turned terribly cold at Daemon's words, but he wouldn't give Daemon the satisfaction of victory. Are you still angry that my mother made your father forget Princess Alyssa? Don't you feel rage when you think about it? Maekar spoke in a gentle tone, but the provocation in his words couldn't be more obvious. In an instant, Dark Sister left its scabbard, a look of pure fury appeared on Daemon's face. How dare you, you filthy bastard! Bahamut, seeing his rider threatened, coiled his head around Maekar and roared menacingly. Something Caraxes imitated. Both dragon riders and their respective dragons were on the verge of battle at any moment. Chapter 05 The King, the Queen, and the Prince, too. As the fight was about to break out, the sound of a galloping horse caught the attention of both Daemon and Maekar. They both looked toward the entrance of the dragon pit and saw a knight in gleaming white armor. The white cloak over his shoulders and the imposing helm drew the attention of both princes. The knight's green eyes were sharp, piercing, and undeniably powerful. Removing his helm, the knight revealed an aged, hard, and perfectly shaven face. This was none other than the greatest swordsman of his time, the legendary and brutal Ser Ryam Redwyn, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard and, for a short period, Hand of the King. The man ignored both dragons and dismounted from his horse. He placed his hand on the hilt of his sword and stepped between the two princes. Ser Ryam, it has been some time. The last time was when I was 5, you came to deliver my father's letter to Raventry. I hope you are protecting the king with loyalty and honor. Maekar looked at the old knight and spoke with a smile, losing all the indifference and coldness he had shown when talking to Daemon. I shall continue to protect the king until the last breath leaves my lungs, my prince. Ryam looked at the young prince before him with an expression of approval. As an experienced warrior, he could see that the teenager had the posture of a formidable swordsman. There were no openings or even relaxed muscles. Knowing Maekar was only 13, this showed how extraordinary the young prince was. Ryam seemed to see that the title of the most powerful swordsman in the realm would belong to the young prince before him in the future. If Ryam knew that Maekar could be equally deadly with every weapon in the world and was only not a perfect killing machine because he was so young, he might not have been so calm, but rather terrified. Genius is one thing, monstrosity was something else entirely. Ryam looked at Daemon, who had his sword drawn and pointed at Maekar, and spoke with a calm and serene expression. The king has ordered that the dragon rider be invited to the great hall. As arrogant, pretentious, and cruel as he was, in the face of the orders of the old king, who had built 6 decades of peace and prosperity for Westeros, he did not dare say a word. Glaring coldly at Maekar, the rogue prince mounted Caraxes and disappeared from Maekar's sight. I love seeing that furious expression of his. Nothing gives me more joy, Maekar commented with a sarcastic laugh, which made Ryam smile as well. It is not wise to be an enemy of someone like Prince Daemon. Men like him are dangerous. Ryam couldn't help but advise the young prince in a gentle and calm tone. He seemed like a kind and warm old man. No one would imagine that a man like this could kill 10 men in a few minutes. Dangerous. Maekar seemed to hear something funny. That is exactly why he is predictable. He thinks he is powerful because he is impulsive and possesses Caraxes, but he is nothing more than an arrogant idiot. Ryam only smiled and did not respond. He looked at the massive dragon behind Maekar. It is a beautiful dragon, my prince. Well, he was the one who came to me, otherwise, I might never have had a dragon in my entire life. Maekar's voice was a mixture of love for Bahamut and sarcasm for a certain paranoid and traumatized king. Again, Ryam only smiled and did not respond, not when it involved the king's private matters. As a Kingsguard, his duty was to protect and nothing more. Giving advice was definitely not one of his talents. After all, he was considered the worst hand of the king to ever hold the office. The king awaits you in the great hall, my prince. Seeing that Maekar seemed in no hurry to meet the king, Ryam spoke again. Sorry, sometimes I get lost in my thoughts. Maekar smiled and spoke in a calm tone. He looked at Bahamut, and the dragon, as if extending his thoughts, lay down on the ground and closed his eyes. Looking back at Ryam, Maekar spoke with a harmless smile on his lips. Let us go, my dear grandfather must be anxious to meet me for the first time. Hearing this, Ryam twitched his lips and seriously doubted the king was anxious to meet Maekar. After all, Maekar had not been summoned to King's Landing for 13 years, and if it weren't for Prince Baelon, the young prince might not have set foot in King's Landing until the old king's death. The great hall contains the king's throne room. The Iron Throne sits upon a raised iron dais with high, narrow steps. A long carpet stretches from the throne to the great oak and bronze doors of the hall. The cavernous great hall can accommodate 1,000 people for a feast. The hall is oriented north to south, with high, narrow windows on the east and west walls. Skulls of Targaryen dragons once adorned the walls. Above the steps, the Iron Throne rose like a monster of blackened and uncomfortable steel. Aegon I Targaryen made the throne from the swords of defeated enemies and forged it so that whoever sat on it would feel uncomfortable. As if he wanted to remind his successors that being king was not easy. Maekar raised his head and looked at the old man sitting on the Iron Throne. Jaehaerys was almost skeletal, his hair and beard were white and had grown to his waist, but he still sat upright with a wise and dignified appearance. It was said that his smile could warm the heart of any maiden and that his frown could make a man's blood run cold. However, Maekar felt nothing but indifference in his gaze. Nevertheless, the prince took a step forward and then another, his head was held high. He showed no fear or any other emotion and reached the bottom of the steps with an upright posture worthy of a prince. "My king, seeing you in good health fills me with joy," Maekar said with a gentle smile while looking directly into the king's violet eyes, eyes that were similar to his own. Jaehaerys did not respond, only looked at the teenager below the steps with a calm and deep gaze. In those violet eyes of the teenager, the same eyes he had, the king seemed to see a trace of explicit sarcasm, as if he were mocking him. "Look at me, I am a dragon rider, even after you did everything to prevent it." Jaehaerys narrowed his eyes and etched the figure of the tall teenager into his mind. Beyond a powerful gaze, the teenager looked like a little king. Just by standing still, he could capture everyone's attention. As if he were the most important person in the room. Honestly, the teenager looked more like a prince than all his sons and daughters combined. This irritated him in a way he didn't want it to. "I see you have obtained a dragon, Prince Maekar." The first sentence Maekar heard from Jaehaerys in his entire life was a question, delivered in a cold and questioning tone. "He came to me, it seems I was born to be a dragon rider." Maekar emphasized the word, born, and spoke in an innocent and gentle tone. Indeed, born to be a dragon rider. Despite his feelings, Jaehaerys did not let his thoughts show on his face and spoke calmly. "Does the dragon have a name?" "Bahamut, a dragon of platinum and gold scales," Maekar replied in a gentle and courteous tone, always keeping his eyes on the old king's aged and expressionless face. He had to admire that Jaehaerys had perfected the art of controlling his expressions to the pinnacle. He could see no apparent emotion in the old king's expression. "Bahamut." Jaehaerys murmured the name. He looked at Maekar again and spoke in a calm tone. "From this moment on, you shall reside in the Red Keep. Raventry Hall cannot accommodate such a large dragon." Maekar scoffed internally. Raventry didn't have the conditions to accommodate a dragon. Dragons could dig a hole in the ground and create a nest. There was no problem in choosing the environment. Jaehaerys just didn't want him to grow too strong and win over all the noble houses in the Riverlands, becoming too powerful. The prince had to admit, Jaehaerys was a political genius. Unfortunately, the old king could never imagine that a teenager had already won over half of the noble houses in the Riverlands. If he knew, with Jaehaerys' caution and paranoia, Maekar probably wouldn't even be allowed to leave his room. However, Maekar did not refuse and accepted with a smile. It was exactly what he wanted. "I am tired from the journey, I hope to have a good night's sleep, Your Majesty." "You may withdraw, Prince Maekar." Jaehaerys nodded and closed his eyes, with no desire to look at Maekar again. After Maekar left the Great Hall, Ryam, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, looked at the king and knew he was worried about something. "Has something happened, my king?" Ryam, who would be considered the worst hand of the king, asked directly. "The ambition in his eyes reminds me of someone." Jaehaerys opened his eyes and said slowly, in a cold and indifferent tone. The image of a large man with a cruel and arrogant smile appeared in the old king's mind. Ryam was confused, but seeing the king's expression, he remained silent. "Maekar," Jaehaerys thought with an eternally indifferent gaze. Chapter 06 The King, the Queen, and the Prince 3. Maekar did not go to visit his father at that moment. He had no desire to see a dying man. He was replaying the conversation he had with Jaehaerys and smiled coldly. The old king seemed cautious of him, a mere 13-year-old boy. "Did he see my ambition?" Maekar was looking out at King's Landing from his bedroom balcony and murmured to himself. "He must have noticed that I am not as harmless as I appear. Perhaps he even sees me as a second Maekar, especially now that I am a dragon rider mounting an adult dragon. However, Jaehaerys is worthy of being a king. Even old, thin, and weak, the man emanated a powerful aura. Maekar laughed, remembering the old king's expressionless face. Those violet eyes seemed deep and terrifying. More than half a century of being king and an experienced politician did that to people. Looking at the city below, Maekar's violet eyes were calmer than ever. This was a game he was willing to play. Sitting on the bed, he took off his boots and lay down, his eyes staring at the ceiling. There was a smile on his lips. You want to hinder my influence, but I will show you that locking me in this castle will be the worst thing you've ever done. Maekar murmured, gradually closing his eyes. The next day, Maekar was in the castle library reading a large, heavy book about old Valyria. It was knowledge that no other place possessed, only House Targaryen held in its possession. It explained how Valyrian society functioned. Maekar knew that George Martin had created Valyria with inspiration from the Roman Empire, so Valyria had many similarities to Rome. There was no king in Valyria. The civilization was governed by an imperial senate, in which the 44 houses of dragonlords possessed the right to create, edit, and modify laws, as well as serving as a council where matters of war could be discussed. It was a civilization that was democratic in certain things and far from democracy in others. For example, House Targaryen was weak in the imperial senate. Although it had a voice in the senate, it was essentially excluded from the factional struggles within the senate. At the same time, two main factions fought in the senate, the Blood faction and the Fire faction, representing the two branches of Valyrian magic. Those who had the largest, strongest, and fastest dragons were the ones who had the most voice in the senate. At the same time, Maekar discovered that the dragons of old Valyria could reach gigantic sizes, while the dragons of House Targaryen were not as large. Maekar discovered that this discrepancy was due to blood magic, which could keep dragons young and growing infinitely. That's interesting, Maekar murmured, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the wood of the library table. They said Visenya knew about blood magic, but it doesn't seem that's true. She might have had a bit of knowledge, but she was far from being powerful enough to keep dragons young so they grow infinitely. Suddenly, the sound of a cane hitting the floor echoed not far away. Maekar turned his head and saw two people, both women, one elderly and the other young. The elderly woman walked toward him, using a cane to assist her walking. The young woman beside her also helped the woman walk. The woman's blue eyes stared at him with a gentle gaze full of wisdom. Maekar stood up and walked toward the woman. He quickly reached her and greeted her with a smile. The rumors about my grandmother's beauty do not do justice to her actual appearance. I shall cut off the heads of those bards for not exaggerating in their songs and stories. The woman was surprised for a moment and smiled. She looked at the tall and healthy Maekar with a gentle and wise gaze. I am old and was never considered beautiful like my sisters and daughters, my grandson, she said in a more amused tone, which surprised the young woman beside her. How long had it been since her mother had smiled or even shown any joy? Looking at good Queen Alysanne, Maekar showed a gentle and respectful gaze. The only person who truly sent letters to him was Alysanne. The woman always asked about his daily life, and he also asked about the queen's daily life. If those people are blind, I am not, Maekar said with a smile. Besides, a woman's old age only makes her more beautiful. There is nothing more natural and beautiful than that. It seems you have learned poetry, my little prince. Alysanne couldn't help but laugh at Maekar's words. Let us sit. I am too old to stand, Alysanne said as she extended her hand, and Maekar promptly held it and guided the good queen toward the table where he had been. When everyone sat down, Maekar looked with curiosity at the young adult beside Alysanne. He knew her name. It was Gael Targaryen, the last daughter of Alysanne and Jaehaerys. However, this woman should have died in 99 AC, but she was alive and apparently well. Perhaps because Gael was still alive and well, Alysanne's health and psychological state were still relatively good. For which Maekar was grateful. He truly didn't want this woman of extraordinary wisdom to die of depression. Hello, nephew, Gael greeted with a shy and sweet look. She had a somewhat naive and fragile appearance, looking like a beautiful doll that could break with the slightest touch. Hello, aunt, Maekar greeted the woman back with a gentle and warm smile. He liked this kind of person. In this world full of murders, lies, and conspiracies, not having to worry about a stab in the back was simply refreshing. Before Maekar's intense eyes, Gael's pale cheeks turned red. She looked away and didn't have the courage to look directly at Maekar. Her heart began to beat faster, which made her cheeks flush even more. Which made Maekar laugh. It was the first time he had seen a person truly blushing, and he had to admit, it was adorable. For a moment, he wanted to pull Gale into his arms and kiss those lovely, adorable cheeks. Seeing the interaction between Gale and Maekar, Alysanne's smile grew, her eyes sparkled, and an amused look appeared in her eyes. A conspiracy was already forming in her mind. After seeing the two talking, Alysanne commented with a relieved smile. It was a surprise when I heard you arrived in King's Landing mounted on a dragon. Don't even get me started. Bahamut simply appeared at Raventry Hall and claimed me as if I were his son, Maekar said in a helpless tone, but there was a smile on his lips. Alysanne was surprised and laughed, as did Gale. The image of a massive dragon chasing Maekar was quite funny. That only shows that the bond between you is extraordinary, Alysanne said in an elegant and gentle tone. Although she was old, she still seemed more alive than ever. She was small but still upright, her hair was tied in an elegant bun. Remembering something, Maekar smiled at Alysanne and said in a calm tone. Grandmother, by order of the king, I will be living in the Red Keep. Alysanne's gentle gaze turned cold for a moment before returning to its previous gentle appearance. Knowing the antipathy her husband felt for Maekar, she understood perfectly what Jaehaerys wanted to do. For 13 years, almost 14 years, Jaehaerys had never asked Maekar to come to King's Landing, and suddenly, he wanted the boy to stay in the Red Keep. Maekar had become someone Jaehaerys could no longer pretend didn't exist. Maekar was a dragon rider, mounting a powerful adult dragon, that was something precious even for House Targaryen. I will prepare a room for you near mine, come and keep me company more often in the future. Leaving those complicated thoughts aside, Alysanne looked at the handsome Maekar and said in a gentle tone. Only a fool would refuse something so good. Maekar had long wanted to absorb all the wisdom and insight of this extraordinary woman. After all, although he might be good in combat because of his cheats, he was a teenager in his past life and didn't know how to truly govern. After all, conquering was easy, keeping the throne was hard. It will be an honor, grandmother, Maekar said, placing his hand on his chest and bowing in an exaggerated manner, making Gale let out a sweet laugh and Alysanne smile with a gentle look in her blue eyes. Chapter 07 The Pale Prince and the Prince of Spring 1. The conversation was pleasant. Maekar was a social butterfly thanks to his rank A charisma. No matter the topic, he could always make things lighter and more enjoyable. Both Alysanne and Gale laughed at his words and jokes. Every time Alysanne tried to steer the conversation toward Maekar's father, the prince skillfully changed the subject while smiling at the good queen with a calm gaze. Alysanne, knowing she couldn't help, stopped trying and continued to chat without the weight of other matters, just a conversation between grandmother and grandson. Mother, it's getting late, Gale said softly in a sweet and gentle tone, noticing that hours had passed since the start of the conversation. Alysanne looked toward the window and couldn't help but be surprised to see the sun high in the sky. Afternoon was approaching, which meant she had spent 2 hours simply talking. The queen looked at Maekar with a touch of surprise and calmed herself. She had simply become too involved in the conversation to notice the passage of time. Maekar, after visiting your father, come to my chambers to keep me company for another enjoyable afternoon. Leaving those words, Alysanne walked away using her cane. Gale looked gently at Maekar and helped her mother walk. A great ally, Maekar, who was determined to be king, couldn't help but comment after having such a long conversation with Alysanne. The woman was practically a library with legs. Along with the prestige accumulated over decades, his grandmother was simply the perfect ally. Although he loved Alysanne, it didn't change the fact that she was an excellent ally for gaining other allies. Honestly, he hadn't previously thought Alysanne could be his ally, as she was Jaehaerys' wife, and despite the disagreements between the couple, they both loved each other deeply. However, Alysanne's arrival proved that things were not so simple. Maekar was not arrogant enough to think he could completely hide his ambitions, especially with only months to gain enough prestige to convince the lords during the Great Council at Harrenhal the following year. When he began to secure the submission and support of the lords, even a fool could see that he hoped to be king. Having someone like Alysanne could save him a lot of breath and noble parties, time he could use to gain even more prestige. However, it seems I have to talk to my father to get my grandmother's support, Maekar murmured in a slightly helpless tone. If he wanted Alysanne's support, he had to talk to his father. Alysanne's last words were as much a test as they were a mother's request. Looking out the window, Maekar showed a calm expression and smiled. If Alysanne wanted him to see Baelon, he would see him. He truly wanted to see if the Spring Prince would dare try to ignore the source of his anger and act as if nothing had happened. Entering the room, the first thing Maekar smelled was the scent of milk of the poppy in the air. He couldn't help but think that the maesters were truly a bunch of butchers. If milk of the poppy didn't work, bloodletting would. Maekar set those thoughts aside and looked at the bed, where a man could be seen lying under a red sheet with the House Targaryen crest. He was tall, with broad shoulders, short silver-gold hair, and a pair of beautiful light purple eyes. It was Baelon Targaryen, the current Prince of Dragonstone, also known as the Brave and the Spring Prince. Of course, his most important identity was that Baelon was Maekar's father. "You're not as handsome as I expected." Maekar sat beside the bed and spoke in a calm tone, looking at the man who had ignored him his entire life. Baelon looked at the tall young man beside his bed and said in a gentle, nostalgic tone, "Aemon was always the most handsome among us. He always caught the attention of all the ladies, even though he was married to Jocelyn, a perfect couple. Unfortunately, I never met my uncle or his wife," Maekar said in a truly sad tone. In this era, Aemon was considered the pinnacle of glory. Handsome, kind, courteous, intelligent, and a prodigy swordsman, the perfect prince whom Jaehaerys I Targaryen had trained to succeed him. Unfortunately, a mere arrow ended the life of such an incredible man who could have taken House Targaryen to new heights. Jocelyn, one of the most beautiful women in the realm, was widowed and was still alive at this moment. She had 30 years of life left, as far as he knew, since the woman died in 129 AC. If he were alive, he probably would have stabbed me for abandoning you at Raventry, called me irresponsible, a scoundrel. Alyssa would have looked at me with disappointment and punched me in the face, Baelon said in a bitter and helpless tone. Maekar's expression didn't change. He looked silently at the man, who was lost in nostalgia and bitterness. "I never cared whether or not you were in my life," Maekar spoke in a calm tone. He was not desperate for affection, especially paternal. Whether in his past life or this one, he was not an orphan. He had an uncle who acted as a father in his life. As for maternal love, Maekar had Cassandra, his mother in this world. Unfortunately, the world had taken that wonderful woman from him. Looking into Baelon's eyes, Maekar spoke in an even calmer tone, without any feeling of anger. "The one who taught me to ride was my uncle, the one who taught me to shave was my uncle, the one who taught me to court women was my uncle. Your absence was not truly felt. After all, he was my father in every sense." A bitter laugh escaped Baelon's lips. He had no way to refute his son's words. He truly hadn't done anything a father would do. Beyond the blood ties linking them, there was absolutely nothing that would make him considered a father. After a moment of silence, Baelon looked at Maekar with an apologetic gaze and asked in a hesitant tone, "How did she die?" However, before he could even finish his words, he saw his son's calm eyes turn cold and indifferent. "You have no right to know." Just like his eyes, the words were cold and indifferent. They left no room for Baelon to ask anything. Baelon opened his mouth, but his voice couldn't come out. He closed his mouth and let out a sigh. He, who had always considered himself a dignified and honorable man, never thought he would be hated by his own son. He had to admit, it was a painful and bitter feeling. Looking at the ceiling, Baelon murmured, "I'm sorry, I couldn't look at Cassandra. Whenever I saw her, I felt I was betraying Alyssa. I always thought it was unfair that she went to see Balerion before me while I remained alive in this world full of beauty and pleasures." From what Maekar knew, Balerion was the god of death in Valyrian culture, so he understood Baelon's analogy. At the same time, Maekar saw how great Baelon's feelings were for Alyssa, or rather, the feelings all members of House Targaryen had for their respective spouses. They loved with such intensity that it was hard for a normal person to even imagine what it was like to love someone so much. "Maekar, I have no excuses, nor do I dare ask your forgiveness." Baelon looked at Maekar with a gentle and understanding gaze. "But let me make it up to you, even if it's just to soothe a small part of the anger you feel for me." Maekar looked at Baelon with a complex gaze but still spoke in a calm tone. "I think you have the wrong impression of something. I don't hate you, I'm just angry that you didn't visit my mother in her final moments." Maekar looked at Baelon and continued speaking in a calm tone. "So, whatever you do makes no sense, because I don't feel any hatred for you." Baelon's eyes widened, and he looked at Maekar as if he were about to cry at any moment. At that moment, he truly felt unworthy of being Maekar's father. Relief and deep regret bubbled in his chest, leaving him breathless for a time. Maekar's words continued to reverberate in his mind before a long sigh escaped his lips. I don't know whether to be happy or sad at your words, he said in a bitter tone full of complexity. But let me make it up to you, you can ask for anything. Baelon looked directly into Maekar's eyes and spoke in a solemn tone. He adjusted himself in bed, despite the agonizing pain in his belly, and sat up. Maekar looked at the man and did not hesitate to ask for what he wanted most. I want the throne. A deafening silence hung in the air at his words. Chapter 08 The Pale Prince and the Prince of Spring 2. Yes, Baelon spoke calmly. Maekar looked deeply at Baelon, a look of surprise on his face. He had expected many things, but never a positive answer. He hadn't asked for a horse or even a toy, but for the Iron Throne, the greatest power on an entire continent. Baelon found amusement in Maekar's surprised expression and said with a gentle smile, while I cannot promise you will sit on the Iron Throne, I can try. That paranoid old man will refuse, Maekar said in a slightly sarcastic tone and looked away from Baelon. He truly wasn't used to being looked at with such kindness, especially by the man he despised. Paranoid old man. This time it was Baelon's turn to show an expression of surprise. Then he laughed and said with a wide smile, yes, he is a very paranoid old man. Paranoid old man was a quite fitting description for Jaehaerys, something Baelon agreed with. His father was indeed a paranoid man, especially regarding anything related to a possible civil war. Besides, I am the third son, there are Viserys and Daemon in the line of succession, not to mention Rhaenys and Laenor, Maekar added in a calm tone. In terms of the line of succession, even Laenor Velaryon was above him, as he was the king's eldest grandson, son of Princess Rhaenys. You don't need to worry about Laenor, my father will never give him the Iron Throne, Baelon said in an even gentler tone. After all, his surname is Velaryon, not Targaryen. As for Rhaenys, Baelon showed a complex expression as he remembered his niece, daughter of his elder brother, and continued speaking. If she were unmarried, her chance of getting the throne might be greater, but she is married to Corlys Velaryon. That man is already the richest man in Westeros, not to mention the powerful fleet he possesses. If he were king consort, Velaryon would be the name above all others. Only a Targaryen must sit on the Iron Throne and nothing else. Let's not speak of Daemon, he is simply not suited to be king. A general, yes, but not a king. Remembering his second son, Baelon showed a gentle and helpless look. He inherited all of Alyssa's impulsiveness. Did he not inherit that from you, Baelon the Brave? Maekar said in a sarcastic tone. Baelon couldn't help but look a bit embarrassed and spoke with a dry laugh. I was small, and Balerion refused to accept me as his rider. I simply became furious and punched him in the nose. Maekar let out an unexpected laugh at Baelon's words. He began to laugh. Who was Balerion? He was the legendary dragon that Aegon I Targaryen rode during the conquest of Westeros. He wasn't just the dragon of House Targaryen, he was the ultimate symbol of power, a symbol that could make everyone bend the knee. The symbol that forced the continent of Westeros, which had been at war for 12,000 years, to finally be unified under one crown. That was Balerion in the eyes of the world. Baelon having punched this terrible dragon simply showed how brave he was, that was why he was called the Brave. Seeing Maekar laughing like a normal teenager, Baelon also showed a smile. He felt he was closer to his son. As for Viserys, he is no king. Baelon shook his head and said in a helpless tone. Instead of calling him a king, it's better to call him a prince regent. He doesn't want to change anything, only to manage the decades of peace my father built. That is not a king, but a prince who doesn't want to change anything. That's why he's Jaehaerys' favorite, Maekar commented in a calm tone. Viserys was the one Jaehaerys liked most, as he could continue the policy of peace and balance he had built over nearly 7 decades of hard work, sweat, and many battles. Because of the civil war between Maekar and Aegon, he saw the terror of a war between dragons, so my father will always choose the best person to prevent something like that from happening again. Baelon knew his father very well and knew how the old king's mind worked. How stupid, Maekar said in a sarcastic tone. He thought it was great stupidity. Instead of choosing the best, he chose the most peaceful. To some extent, Jaehaerys' choice was right, but the old king forgot that the world has never lacked ambitious people. Those same people led to the nearfall of the Targaryen dynasty and, at the same time, destroyed the greatest power of House Targaryen, the dragons. Baelon did not comment on Maekar's words. Although he thought Viserys was not suited to be king, he also didn't think it was a terrible option, as Maekar was subtly indicating. I've met my half-brother, he is indecisive. Maekar looked at Baelon and said in a calm tone. An indecisive king is worse than a weak king. In a moment of firmness, what do you think your son will do? Start a war or initiate a dialogue, trying to delay the problems as much as possible. Baelon remained silent, but deep down, he agreed with Maekar's words. Jaehaerys, his son, was indeed indecisive and wanted to preserve the peace Jaehaerys built more than anything, which made things even more complicated. I'm still getting used to my new bed. Maekar, feeling he had nothing more to say, spoke in a calm tone. Baelon seemed visibly disappointed not to talk more with Maekar, but he knew that forcing a conversation would have the opposite effect of what he wanted. The Prince of Dragonstone looked at Maekar and said with a smile, "The view from the window is very good, I advise drinking a bit while you enjoy the view." Maekar looked at the pale man in the bed with his violet eyes and nodded before leaving the room. He truly didn't want to talk to Baelon. Every time he saw the man, he remembered his mother's last words. Watching his back disappear from the room, Baelon fell weakly onto the bed. He touched his belly with an expression of pain. The prince felt he wouldn't survive. This left him somewhat distressed and relieved. He would see Alyssa again, though perhaps he would be greeted by a punch from his late wife. Maekar. Baelon murmured his third son's name. The boy had the same arrogant look as Cassandra, the same look that had fascinated him that day. You truly created a great man. I only hope this great man is not the cause of many deaths. From the conversation he had just had with Maekar, Baelon knew that Maekar would fight for the throne, not just out of a thirst for power, but to demonstrate that he was better than Jaehaerys' chosen one. Father, your paranoia and caution will one day make you regret, Baelon murmured, feeling his consciousness slowly fade. He slowly fell asleep. Outside the room, Maekar returned to his room after a while of walking. Hesitating for a moment, he walked to the balcony and looked at King's Landing. It was indeed a good view, although the city wasn't that beautiful. When I am king, I must change this city, Maekar murmured. Although King's Landing was one of the 5 largest cities in Westeros, it wasn't truly worthy of being the capital of the 7 kingdoms. Remembering the conversation with Baelon, Maekar was slightly surprised. He himself hadn't expected Baelon to actually accept his request for the throne. Of course, Jaehaerys definitely wouldn't agree, but just Baelon's desire to pass the throne to him would spread throughout the city. This was a great support for his claim to the throne, which would make others see him in a different light. One step at a time, Maekar murmured. He had been planning to be king for a long time, he just needed to follow his plans, and his chances of becoming king at the Great Council of 101 would be great. Knowing Jaehaerys' personality, it was almost certain that the paranoid old man would accept the Lord's votes. Chapter 09 The Pale Prince and the Delicate Princess 1. The following morning, Maekar had just finished bathing after sword practice and was sitting in a chair, a blank canvas before him. The brush glided over the paint and then onto the canvas. Painting had always been a hobby of his, whether in his past life or this one. Maekar never stopped painting in this life. It calmed him and forced him to think with composure and detachment. The brush glided elegantly and gracefully over the blank canvas, gradually outlining the sketch of a female body. Without realizing it, he gradually painted a woman's form. Soon he found himself painting her hair and a delicate, inhumanly beautiful face. It was Gale. Remembering that beautiful face, a smile appeared on Maekar's lips. He wouldn't say it was love at first sight, but he found his aunt irresistibly beautiful. And, like any man, he desired to see beautiful things, and Gale was definitely an extremely beautiful woman. Maekar stopped painting when someone knocked on his bedroom door. Looking at the canvas, where a woman lay on a sofa with her naked body covered only by a crimson sheet, he couldn't help but think of his aunt again. The entire painting was still colorless. Only the crimson sheet actually had color, but this gave the painting a somewhat unexpected ethereal air. Showing a smile, Maekar stopped painting and wiped his hands with a white cloth. Standing up, he went to the door and opened it, revealing a small, pale young woman. She looked like a doll that would break at the slightest touch. She had silver hair and a pair of pale lilac eyes. The young woman wore a blue and white silk dress. Her hair was styled in an elegant bun that strongly resembled Alysanne's. It was Gale. Maekar couldn't help but look back and then at the door. It was truly too much of a coincidence. He had just finished painting Gale, and the young woman herself appeared before him. Aunt, Maekar greeted the young woman with a smile. His lips were beautiful and full, almost like a forbidden fruit tempting others to commit sins. Gale looked at them and turned away with a shy gaze, feeling her heart beat faster. In her eyes, her nephew was truly more beautiful than any bard or lord she had seen in her life. He had the beauty of the Targaryens but a strong and intense aura. This made it almost impossible to look away. Every time he appeared, everyone's focus unconsciously returned to him. "Did I interrupt something, Maekar?" Gale asked, noticing his paint-stained fingertips and then the blank canvas on the wooden stand. She felt an immense curiosity about what he was painting. Suddenly, Gale saw a hand extended toward her and saw Maekar looking at her with an amused and teasing gaze. "If you want to know, why don't you come in and see if you're interrupting anything?" His voice sent shivers through her body, almost leaving her legs trembling. The princess didn't know why she did something so crazy by her standards, but she took Maekar's hand, letting him pull her into the room. Gale's gaze unconsciously swept the room. It was the first time she had seen a boy's room so tidy and clean. Viserys's rooms were cluttered with pieces of his model everywhere. Daemon's room was even worse, it looked as if a typhoon had swept through it. Maekar's room still smelled of fresh paint. She looked down and saw that she was still holding Maekar's hand. She wanted to pull her hand away, but her nephew wouldn't let her, gripping her hand even tighter. "Is the court fun, Aunt?" Maekar's teasing voice sounded beside Gale, almost giving the young woman a start. She looked shyly to the side and saw Maekar looking at her with an intense gaze. Gale felt her skin burn with the intensity of his stare. It was almost as if he wanted to undress her. Yes, despite her shyness, she remained beside Maekar. Her sweet and delicate voice sounded low, as if she were timid. "The parties are fun, though a bit too noisy." Honestly, Maekar had invited Gale in to tease her a bit, but after seeing her adorable reactions, he became addicted to the feeling. It was incredibly fun and delightful to see his aunt's reactions. It was as if she provoked him to intimidate her. Gently pulling her by the hand, Maekar brought her in front of the painting. Gale unconsciously looked at the painting and froze. Lying on a sofa, a naked woman was covered only by a crimson sheet. Behind her was a beautiful and elaborate room. What shocked her was the woman's face. Herself. Suddenly, Gale felt a warm breath in her ear, tickling her. Then, Maekar's voice sounded somewhat strange, slightly husky, almost as if he were suppressing something. "Unfortunately, I only have my model's face. I haven't managed to paint her body yet." Gale felt her mouth go dry. Maekar's masculine and intense aura made her feel as if she were beside a dragon, hot and dominant. However, her eyes were fixed on the woman in the painting. She couldn't believe she was so beautiful in Maekar's eyes. Regaining her clarity, she stepped away and spoke in a tone full of shyness and a touch of anger. "Nephew, do not intimidate me, or I will tell my mother." Maekar wanted to laugh. She looked adorable when angry, making him want to intimidate her even more. "I ask your forgiveness." Gently holding her hand, he brought it to his lips and kissed those beautiful fingers tenderly. He spoke in an apologetic tone, looking directly into his aunt's lilac eyes. "Could you forgive me?" Gale wanted to be angry with him. He was obviously teasing her on purpose, but faced with that gentle touch of lips and those warm eyes full of kindness, words of reproach did not leave her beautiful lips. In the end, she couldn't feel angry with Maekar. She only felt a bit of happiness and a touch of feminine pride. Seeing that handsome young man courting her left her full of happiness and pride. "It's all right," she spoke in a sweet and delicate tone, not daring to look into Maekar's eyes. Maekar, knowing he couldn't cross a certain limit so as not to waste all the effort thus far, let go of her hand with a touch of reluctance. Reluctance that Gale also shared at that moment. She liked holding Maekar's hand. Though she felt reluctance, Gale finally remembered the reason she had come and spoke in a soft tone. "Mother asked you to eat with her." Maekar nodded, feeling no surprise. He had visited Baelon the day before. Of course Alysanne had found out. "Let's go, we won't leave the queen hungry," Maekar said in an amused tone, making Gale laugh adorably. "Gale." Looking at that smile, Maekar spoke in a calm and deep tone. Gale was surprised by the change in tone but looked at Maekar with eyes that resembled innocent and adorable rabbits. "Would you allow me to be intimate with you from this moment on?" Maekar asked, continuing to look at Gale with an intense and unquestionable gaze. "No," Gale said, but faced with Maekar's gaze, her tone of voice lowered and finally she spoke in a shy tone. "Just a little." Taking a step forward, Maekar gently kissed her cheek while continuing to look at her. "That is your reward for accepting, he said in a teasing and gentle tone. Gale felt her brain stop with just the kiss on the cheek. She blushed like never before and, without daring to look at Maekar again, ran out of the room. Seeing her beautiful back disappearing before him, Maekar touched his own lips, remembering the sensation of kissing Gale's cheek, and smiled. Thinking of Gale's adorable appearance, Maekar felt a fire awakening in his heart. He was not an indecisive man, much less a coward. He knew better than anyone that he wanted to possess that beautiful and lovely princess. I am greedy, a mere kiss on the cheek cannot satisfy me, my lovely aunt. Chapter 10 The Pale Prince and the Delicate Princess 2. Alysanne was at the table, calmly sipping a glass of juice, her eyes stared at Gale with a touch of teasing. Since she had returned, her daughter had been shyer than usual, looking down and blushing even more intensely. She didn't need to be a genius to know that something had happened between her grandson and her daughter. Alysanne wasn't surprised by this. Ever since she saw Maekar, she knew what kind of man he was. Extremely confident, charismatic to the extreme, and, above all, dominant. Her daughter was like an innocent white rabbit before a greedy dragon. Raising the glass of juice to her lips, Alysanne spoke in a gentle and teasing tone. Did you enjoy yourself with Maekar, dear? Gale, still thinking about what had happened, blushed even more at her mother's words. She didn't dare look at her mother and ate the bread in her hand with small bites, almost like an adorable squirrel. Mama likes to tease me too, Gale murmured with a touch of helplessness in her voice. She didn't understand why the people around her always liked to intimidate her. Despite her age, Alysanne heard her daughter's murmur and let out a cheerful laugh. She looked at her daughter and commented in a happy tone, "Who asked you to be so cute and have such varied reactions?" Gale huffed but didn't refute Alysanne's words. She was the perfect target for people like Maekar and Alysanne. Resting her head on her hands, Alysanne looked at her daughter and said with a smile, "However, it seems you enjoyed being teased by Maekar." Gale's ears turned red at her mother's words. However, she didn't deny them. Just as Alysanne said, she truly had enjoyed it. He was totally different from any man she had seen before. He was so confident, so handsome, so charming, that it was practically impossible for her not to be attracted to him. Gale wondered why the gods created someone so irresistible. Just as Gale was ready to respond, the door opened and Maekar entered wearing more comfortable clothes. Sorry for the delay, Maekar said, looking first at Gale and then at Alysanne. He approached the table and sat in the chair across from Gale and to Alysanne's right. I'm starving, Maekar said, taking a piece of bread, buttering it, and then eating. Alysanne didn't mind the lack of manners, she just looked at him with a gentler gaze. She liked it that way, family shouldn't be so formal. I heard you spoke with your father, Alysanne said, also eating a slice of bread. Her eyes stared at Maekar with a smiling look. Yes, we complained together about the paranoid old man, Maekar said with a laugh, catching the attention of Alysanne and Gale. Alysanne let out a sigh and remembered when she was still a young princess. She looked at Maekar and said in a calm tone, he was the one most affected during our time as hostages with our grandmother, Queen Visenya. He blamed himself for the death of Viserys, son of Aenys I, and hated Maekar even more. Maekar listened to her words in silence. Aegon had died too early. Had he lived longer, the dynasty would have been better. Unfortunately, the conqueror's successors were either weak or too rigid, which led to all the events and, subsequently, successive wars. However, Maekar still admired Jaehaerys. The boy had been 14 and managed to become king and govern a fragmented kingdom full of hostility. To understand how terrible the situation of House Targaryen was at that moment, all the kingdoms were against Maekar. The faith of the Seven had turned the entire continent against House Targaryen and made the situation even worse. Countless times they tried to kill House Targaryen during Jaehaerys' reign. So, even while detesting Jaehaerys, he admired the old king. He is truly incredible for staying on the throne at such a young age, Maekar said with a genuine tone of admiration. Then, he looked at Alysanne and added, of course, he also had a great woman behind him to help and guide him. Who doesn't know that Alysanne, the good queen, did as much as Jaehaerys for the prosperity of nearly 6 decades? A smile appeared on Alysanne's lips, although there was some temptation of flattery, she could notice the genuine respect for her in his voice. The boy truly admired her, just as he did her husband. This made her look at Maekar in a different light. In this world, not all men could accept a woman being much more successful than a man. Jaehaerys and I fought many battles, be they physical or political, but we always emerged victorious against our enemies, Alysanne said in a calm but somewhat nostalgic tone. Setting that nostalgia aside, Alysanne asked with a smile, however, let's not talk about my life, but about what you asked of your father. Me. Maekar showed a smile and replied casually, as if he had asked for a cake. I asked for the throne. A silence reigned over the table. Gale's eyes widened as she looked at Maekar with an incredulous look on her beautiful face. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. He accepted, but obviously, the paranoid old man won't, Maekar concluded, taking another bite of his bread. You are truly just like your father, bold, Alysanne spoke after a sigh. She had thought of many things, but she never thought Maekar would actually dare to ask for the throne. From the boy's tone, it sounded as if he were asking for something trivial and not the greatest power on the continent. Perhaps it's in the blood, Maekar replied with a confident smile. Since he was prepared to be king, he had to be confident. If he weren't confident, who would follow him? Who would follow a man who didn't even have confidence in himself? Honestly, if I get support, my chances are better than Daemon's or even Jaehaerys', Maekar said in a calm tone. The former is an idiot of catastrophic proportions, the latter is easily manipulated and indecisive. Alysanne listened in silence to her grandson's words about her other grandsons. She agreed with Maekar's conclusion. But she knew the chances weren't as high as Maekar's confidence suggested. She knew her husband better than anyone in this world. It's not so easy to change my husband's mind, Maekar, Alysanne said, taking a sip of juice. Besides, you are the third son. The lords will not accept you because of that. Those stupid lords and their equally stupid traditions. Maekar mocked the lords of Westeros who clung to a stupid tradition of primogeniture. The system of primogeniture is inherently flawed. The firstborn may not be the best, they also exclude women from the line of succession. As if what's between one's legs were an indicator of who is exemplary or not. Maekar deeply despised these stupid traditions, especially the idea that women were not as good as men. As someone who wants to be king, the idea of having a large part of his population inactive because they have a vagina was completely unacceptable. When they have money and raw materials, wouldn't these women do what they want if they had opportunities? Alysanne's eyes practically sparkled when she heard the last part of Maekar's sentence. She could see it wasn't flattery. Maekar truly believed that women could achieve something much more significant and that their destiny wouldn't just be to be wives and mothers. Your words are bold, my grandson, Alysanne spoke in an emotional tone. Not even her husband supported her in some suggestions she had made years ago, such as placing a woman on the small council. Don't think I want to change the world, grandmother. Maekar shook his head. I just think it's a complete waste for women to have to remain only as mothers and wives. It's a force that could bring money and great advances to the realm. I know, but this small advance is enough to subtly change the destiny of all the women in the realm. Alysanne certainly knew that Maekar couldn't be too radical or those changes would do more harm than good, but just the thought of Maekar wanting to change was enough to surpass Jaehaerys, whom her husband had chosen as successor after Baelon. Let's not talk about such serious matters at breakfast anymore. Alysanne changed the subject. She looked at Gale and then at Maekar and said with a smile. Tonight there will be a feast in the Great Hall. A celebration to celebrate another dragon rider in House Targaryen. Maekar was surprised. He couldn't imagine that Jaehaerys would accept something like that, but he soon understood the reasoning behind this decision. Jaehaerys didn't want House Targaryen to appear disunited, so he ordered a feast to celebrate the newest dragon rider of House Targaryen. What a shrewd old man, Maekar murmured with a tone of admiration. Chapter 11 The Party 1. Knowing there would be a feast for him tonight, Maekar decided to make a good impression on everyone present. To do this, he chose to wear the clothes he had commissioned for himself. As for the clothes themselves, it was a black military suit with elements of the Middle Ages. There was no better outfit to showcase a man's elegance and beauty than a suit. So, Maekar created his own version of a suit in this world. In front of the mirror, Maekar finished fastening the last button at his neck and tried moving his body. When he felt it wasn't hindering his movements, he showed an expression of satisfaction. Looking in the mirror, he was even more pleased with what he saw. The suit was entirely black, with only a few details in red. On his right shoulder, there was a long red scarf with the House Targaryen crest embroidered on the fabric. The scarf was a palm and a half wide and fell behind his body, reaching down to his heels. At the front, the scarf was narrower, crossing his chest and reaching his waist. On his feet, He wore a pair of leather boots that reached just below his knees. The boots were covered in a resin that made them particularly shiny under the light of the surrounding torches. Maekar missed having a pocket watch, but unfortunately, he didn't know how to make one. This left him feeling somewhat helpless. Most people think they can do anything if they go back in time, but it's difficult for someone to even know how glass is made, let alone something more complicated like weapons or even a computer. Looking at himself again in the mirror, seeing that there were no wrinkles or even a tear in his clothes, Maekar did not hesitate to leave the room and head toward the great hall, where the feast would be held. As he walked to the place, everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at Maekar with surprised gazes. His clothes drew attention, as they were not only more fitted but also well defined his figure, leaving him more elegant than ever. Faced with the stares of others, Maekar, who was already used to excessive attention, showed nothing but a calm expression. He had lost his stage fright a long time ago. He had lost count of how many parties, balls, and banquets he had attended in the Riverlands, where he had secured the support of countless nobles. Showing a smile on his lips and a look that found it natural to be the center of attention, he walked with calm steps toward the Great Hall. Great Hall. Jaehaerys was not sitting on the Iron Throne, he was sitting in a chair that looked like an ornate throne at the center of the table. He wore his crown and simple black clothes. To his right was Queen Alysanne, wearing an elegant white dress in her familiar hair bun, and Gale herself, in a magnificent, beautiful purple dress. On his left were Viserys, Baelon's son, and Viserys' wife, Emma Arryn. Beside them was Daemon with a cold and indifferent expression. However, from the rogue prince's moody look, one could see he did not want to be present. At another table, on the right side of the Great Hall, were the ministers of the small council. The hand of the king was Baelon Targaryen, but he was bedridden and could not attend. The Grand Maester was Alar, an old man who looked like he might die at any moment. The Master of Coin was the newly appointed and young Lord Lyman Beesbury. Currently, the Master of Laws had not been chosen, so the position had been vacant since '92 for obvious reasons, as the Master of Laws was none other than Aemon Targaryen, Jaehaerys' late crown prince. The Master of Ships was Lord Corlys Velaryon, considered the richest man in Westeros and the legendary sea snake. Beside him was a beautiful woman with black hair and a streak of white hair among the black strands and beautiful lilac eyes. It was none other than Rhaenys Targaryen, daughter of the late crown prince Aemon and Jocelyn Baratheon. The rider of the Red Queen, Meleys, Rhaenys' dragon. The Lord Commander of the Kingsguard was not at the table but behind the king, ready to defend him at any moment, and it was the legendary Ryam Redwyn, the deadliest man of his time. The great hall was packed with noble lords and ladies, as well as unwed ladies and lords. Cheerful music played while everyone seemed happy. Or at least, that's what it appeared. Suddenly, the herald announced loudly, "Prince Maekar of House Targaryen, rider of the dragon Bahamut." Everyone's eyes immediately focused on the entrance of the great hall. Jaehaerys, who had already been present for some time, couldn't help but snort softly. The boy had truly waited until the last minute to arrive, ignoring even him. Under everyone's eyes, the doors were opened, and Maekar entered the great hall with confident steps and a warm smile on his lips. Everyone's eyes showed surprise at his exotic garments. Whether men or women, everyone looked at Maekar with a glint in their eyes. There was something about him that made it difficult for people to look away. Even Jaehaerys couldn't help but think the boy was truly charismatic. Furthermore, he liked the cheeky brat's clothes. They were not only beautiful but also showed the elegance and nobility worthy of a prince. "I apologize for my delay, I had to run, or the women would devour me with their eyes." Maekar approached the main table and spoke in a tired tone, but everyone could feel the amusement in his voice. His words made people laugh, a genuinely cheerful atmosphere hung in the air as everyone seemed more relaxed. Maekar's joke not only extinguished the idea that the prince was arrogant but also made many look at him in a different light. "My king, my queen." Maekar greeted Jaehaerys and Alysanne with a warm smile on his lips. Jaehaerys only nodded and said nothing about his purposeful delay. Alysanne, on the other hand, pointed to the chair beside Gale and spoke in a gentle tone. "You look beautiful in that outfit, my dear prince. Thank you for the compliment." Maekar thanked her and sat in the chair Alysanne had pointed out. He looked at Gale and the beautiful purple dress she wore. Maekar couldn't help but think she was truly stunning, like a goddess who had descended into this world to show mortals the true meaning of the word beauty. "You look stunning, Aunt," Maekar whispered to Gale while smiling teasingly. A true goddess among all the women present. Although his words might sound very cliché and even embarrassing, to Gale those words sounded like the most beautiful in the world. She glanced at the handsome prince beside her and whispered back with a touch of shyness and sweetness in her voice. "You look very handsome too, nephew." Maekar only smiled, satisfied with her compliment. He felt that perhaps this was the best compliment he could get from this shy and sweet girl. Jaehaerys narrowed his eyes at the scene and looked at Alysanne with a deep gaze before rising from his chair. The moment the king stood up, the music ceased completely, and the sound of clinking glasses also stopped. No one dared to breathe a little louder before Jaehaerys's imminent words. With nearly 6 decades of reign, the king's prestige was at its absolute peak. As long as he was alive, no one dared even speak the word rebellion or war. "Today is a memorable day for my noble house." Jaehaerys's voice was low, but it reached everyone's ears through the echo of the great hall. It carried a regal, calm, and deep tone. Another dragonrider has been born, and the strength of House Targaryen only grows stronger with the passage of time. And so it shall be for another 1,000 years and beyond. We will always be strong to protect the realm from any threat. United by blood and fire. On this memorable night, let us celebrate our newest dragonrider, my grandson Maekar. Perhaps because he was old, Jaehaerys did not delve too deeply into his words and spoke quickly. However, Maekar knew the man did not want to give him too much prestige with a long, motivating speech. But those words were enough for him. Maekar stood up as his name was mentioned and smiled at all the men and women. "Thank you for your kind words, grandfather." Looking at Jaehaerys, he continued speaking. "As my grandfather said, House Targaryen will be stronger than ever. We will always be united to protect the realm and our glorious prosperity that my grandfather created over nearly 6 decades with blood, sweat, and much effort." Maekar turned to the crowd and spoke in an amused and relaxed tone. "Well, as I am young, I am not good at speeches, so let us toast to House Targaryen and may we become immensely wealthy in the future." Laughter rang through the place, and applause began to echo through the great hall. "For House Targaryen! For House Targaryen! For House Targaryen!" While Maekar also clapped his hands, he looked at Jaehaerys with a smile. He seemed to say, "Let's have fun in this game, dear grandfather." Jaehaerys looked at the boy and narrowed his eyes, but he did not look away. "Very well, let's play, dear grandson." Jaehaerys felt no fear. On the contrary, it seemed that something within him had awakened after being dormant for a long time. Chapter 12 The Party 2. As time passed, the feast began to unfold more smoothly. People left their tables and started to dance. Others formed groups and began to converse among themselves. However, one common scene could be observed. This was Maekar walking among groups of people. Whether man or woman, everyone seemed drawn to his charisma. Wherever he went, laughter could be heard along with promises of more banquets or parties. With the rank A charisma of Fate's Iskander, he was truly an extremely outgoing person full of charisma. In this short time, Maekar managed to receive about a dozen invitations for entertainment or private meetings. Sitting in his chair, Jaehaerys observed all this with a deep gaze. He had to admit, even grudgingly, that the cheeky brat truly could win allies as naturally as breathing. Jaehaerys felt a twinge of envy. If he had such skills, he would have fled Dragonstone much sooner. Unfortunately, that kind of social skill is something one is born with, not something acquired. Suddenly, his wife's familiar voice sounded beside him, making Jaehaerys look at her with a calm gaze. "Do you think I don't know what you're doing, Jaehaerys?" And Jaehaerys showed little reaction to his wife's words. He felt not a shred of shame in having an intellectual battle with a child of nearly 14. Being king often meant having no sense of shame. "The man I married wouldn't stoop to being cautious of a mere child." Alysanne spoke with the same calm tone as her husband. Her eyes stared at the man beside her with a deep look. "Don't treat me like a fool, Alysanne," Jaehaerys said. "You know better than anyone that this boy is dangerous. He has the ambition and power to tear House Targaryen apart." "Well, you raised a greedy dragon, now deal with the consequences," Alysanne replied in a casual tone, but Jaehaerys felt a touch of sarcasm in her voice. Snorting coldly, Jaehaerys refused to accept that he was to blame for Maekar feeling anger toward his own family. As king, he was never wrong. Only the pieces in the game moved in a way he didn't expect. Only that. "Jaehaerys, you can deal with Maekar, of that I have no doubt," Alysanne spoke with a smile. "But do you think Viserys or Daemon can deal with Maekar?" Alysanne's words made Jaehaerys fall silent. Yes, he could deal with the boy. Regardless of what Maekar did, he couldn't shake his throne, but that didn't mean Viserys or even Daemon could do anything of the sort. Our son has not died, it is not Viserys' turn to be king. Jaehaerys still nurtured hopes that Baelon would survive, as his worries would end if his son could truly live. Alysanne remained silent. She also wanted Baelon to survive. She had lost so many sons and daughters and didn't want another to die. However, after going through so much mourning, she understood that the world was a cruel bastard. So, since Baelon had become bedridden with the unknown illness, she was already training her broken heart to cremate another of her children. It was truly a cruel thing for a mother to train for. Jaehaerys, do you think our children will forgive us for being such bad parents? Alysanne asked, holding her husband's hand beneath the table. There was no expression on her face, but there was a touch of sadness hidden in her eyes. I won't let them blame you, they can criticize me as much as they want. Feeling his wife's trembling hand, Jaehaerys spoke in a calm and indifferent tone. His eyes were still the same as before, as cold as polished steel. Note, Chad Jaehaerys, we are husband and wife, your guilt is also mine, Alysanne said, showing a small smile. Jaehaerys didn't respond, only squeezed Alysanne's hand more firmly. Despite the couple's constant bickering, in the end, their love still burned like dragonfire in each of their chests. While Maekar was speaking with the Lord of Maidenpool, he heard a sarcastic and unpleasant voice behind him. Always seeking attention, Maekar. Maekar turned and saw Daemon, with Dark Sister at his waist. The arrogant and sarcastic expression on his face almost made him punch that despicable face. I was trying to ignore you, but you're like an annoying mosquito, always buzzing in my ears, Maekar replied to Daemon's words with a gentle smile. If Daemon were capable of conversing with cordiality at this feast, he wouldn't mind pretending either. But since Daemon wasn't capable of that, Maekar wouldn't let himself be ridiculed by a reckless clown. It wasn't in his character to show weakness, especially to someone like Daemon. Daemon's face contorted slightly at Maekar's words, but he managed to control himself in the end. Which, honestly, was quite surprising to Maekar, as he expected a confrontation to start at that very moment. The lords around them looked at each other, they all saw the surprise in one another's eyes and all showed curious expressions. In any universe, watching a family drama was one of the most enjoyable activities. Because of this, no one tried to stop what was happening. On the contrary, everyone seemed quite eager for such a thing to occur. Although Jaehaerys had made a speech about unity, the lords didn't want such a thing to actually happen. A united House Targaryen was terrible for the lords, as it meant that at any moment a dragon could come flying over them and burn their castle. Harrenhal burned under the black flames of Balerion, let alone their mere castles. So, instead of a united House Targaryen, they would like a rift between the Dragonriders. For only then could they try to win over a Dragonrider and create a mutual interest group. With a Dragonrider protecting them, they would no longer have to fear House Targaryen so much. By the way, Daemon. Maekar seemed to look for someone around and turned back to Daemon with a smile. I don't see your wife, Lady Royce. Showing a forced smile, he replied in a terribly cold tone. She doesn't come to King's Landing much. Showing an expression of understanding, Maekar lightly tapped Daemon's shoulder and spoke in a sympathetic tone. I understand, I hope you have many sons and daughters. The expressions of everyone around were strange. Children, they had heard that the marriage between Prince Daemon and Lady Rhea Royce was a complete failure. There were rumors that Daemon hadn't even consummated the marriage. After all, 3 years without children was abnormal. Either Daemon was infertile or he truly hadn't consummated the marriage. However, remembering that Daemon frequently visits brothels and there wasn't a single silvergold-haired bastard in King's Landing, it was truly strange for Daemon not to have children. Faced with the stares of everyone around, Daemon's face turned grim, he clenched his jaw, and his hand touched the hilt of his sword. Maekar continued smiling innocently while looking at Daemon's grim face with an amused gaze. He wondered if Daemon would truly be capable of drawing his sword before everyone and pointing it at him. When Daemon was ready to draw Dark Sister, a hand touched his shoulder, and the prince saw his older brother, Viserys, accompanied by his wife, Aemma. Our grandfather noticed something wrong, and I came to check, Viserys said with a worried look. Maekar looked at Viserys and smiled. Despite finding the man somewhat weak, of all the Targaryen kings, Viserys was loved by the lords and the common people. Which wasn't strange, given his affable, generous, and eager-to-please personality. King Viserys' generosity was legendary, and the Red Keep became a place of song and splendor during his reign. He hosted countless balls, banquets, and tournaments, and lavished gold, offices, and honors upon those he favored. However, the man made no truly significant contribution during his reign. Which was a shame. Viserys was a king who liked to maintain the status quo. "Brother, this must be Aemma." Maekar ignored Daemon and asked, looking at the beautiful woman beside Viserys. Daughter of Daela Targaryen and Roderick Arryn, the woman inherited the beauty of House Targaryen and a stronger face that likely came from her father. Looking at Maekar, Viserys showed a happy smile and introduced his wife in a proud tone. "This is Aemma, my wife. Aemma, this is my half-brother, Maekar. It is a pleasure, Prince Maekar." Aemma greeted Maekar very courteously, her voice was pleasant and gentle. Obviously, a very graceful and elegant lady. Viserys always said he had a beautiful wife, but it seems he didn't exaggerate enough when he bragged about you, Aemma. Winking discreetly at Viserys, Maekar spoke with a laugh. Aemma felt embarrassed but looked at her husband with an even more tender gaze. Viserys' smile widened hearing Maekar's compliment. He let out a loud, generous laugh while placing his hand on his younger brother's shoulder. Seeing Aemma's tender expression, he felt that today he would be rewarded in bed with a wild night of passion. Chapter 13 The Party 3. "What were you two talking about?" Viserys asked with a warm smile. "I was asking where Daemon's wife was. I've never met her, so I thought I'd have the chance at this party, but, from what Daemon said, Lady Royce doesn't come to King's Landing often." Maekar spoke with disappointment, as if genuinely sad not to have seen Daemon's wife. Daemon's face contorted at those words. Looking at Maekar's innocent expression, he wanted to draw Dark Sister and wipe that gentle, presumptuous smile off Maekar's face. Viserys looked at Daemon with a look of reprimand, as if blaming Daemon for not bringing Lady Royce to King's Landing more often. He turned back to Maekar and spoke in a gentle tone. "Daemon has always been very free, Maekar. He also spends a lot of time away from King's Landing." Maekar didn't mind and just laughed. He ignored Daemon's gloomy expression, looked at Viserys, and began to chat cheerfully with him. "Brother, I wish I had seen you riding Balerion," Maekar said with a look of admiration, as he looked at Viserys. He wasn't lying, he really wanted to have seen Balerion. Unfortunately, the legendary dragon died in the year 94. Viserys couldn't help but feel proud at Maekar's admiring gaze, but then he showed a sad expression. "I also wanted to show him to you, unfortunately, he died." This was one of Viserys' pains. He had only ridden the dragon a few times, and each time, it wasn't for long, as the dragon was too large and too heavy. "However, I heard you tamed a beautiful adult dragon," Viserys asked, changing the subject, smiling. He didn't like talking about Balerion, it was an eternal pain in his heart. "Tamed?" Maekar seemed to hear something funny. "He came to me and practically claimed me, almost as if adopting me." Maekar's words made Viserys and Aemma laugh. The image of a gigantic dragon chasing a child was truly comical. "You did well, House Targaryen grew stronger with you." Viserys smiled and spoke with a cheerful and genuine tone. Maekar narrowed his eyes and looked at Viserys, trying to see if his words were truly genuine. Was Viserys pretending or was he really happy about him claiming a dragon? He certainly knew the consequences of such a thing. However, no matter how much Maekar looked, Viserys was genuinely happy for him. This left him with a complex feeling. He was trying to usurp his throne, and Viserys was genuinely happy for him. "By the way, your clothes are very cool," Viserys said, looking at Maekar's clothes with a bright gaze. "My uncle's wife made them, they'll probably become something everyone wears in the future." "They're called suits," Maekar said with a smile. He, obviously, wouldn't say that he was the one who made the clothes. He didn't want to be called Maekar, the Prince of Clothes. So, his aunt had to bear the burden of being one of the women who would revolutionize the world of fashion in Westeros. "I'll ask Lady Blackwood to make some for me," Viserys said, looking at the clothes with a very interested gaze. He liked to dress well, the suits really caught his attention. They were elegant, beautiful, and fit the male figure perfectly. "I'll also talk to Lady Blackwood, I hope she made clothes for us women." Aemma also spoke with a bright gaze. If Lady Blackwood could make such beautiful clothes for men, the clothes for women would be stunning. "She'll love it," Maekar said with a mysterious laugh. His uncle's wife was one of the laziest women in the world. Besides sex, the only thing she liked more was staying in bed and relaxing while reading a book. The poor woman simply hated the word work or effort. Seeing Maekar cheerfully talking with Viserys and Aemma, Daemon showed a disdainful smile. Viserys might be innocent enough to believe Maekar, but he saw the true face of that bastard. He was a careerist and ready to stab anyone to gain power. Daemon's antipathy towards Maekar didn't originate only from Maekar's mother, but from Maekar himself being full of ambition. This made him extremely cautious of the bastard and didn't want him in King's Landing. Unfortunately, Jaehaerys' orders had to be followed regardless. Snorting coldly, he let out a cold grunt and left the Great Hall. He didn't want to be present before, much less now. Looking at Daemon's back, Maekar's violet eyes narrowed and he smiled. In his plans, he needed to exile Daemon to Essos, at least for a while. The reason for it being only a temporary exile was simple: it was simply impossible to exile Daemon permanently. As long as Daemon didn't try to kill Jaehaerys or Alysanne, or any other member of House Targaryen, his punishment would only be temporary. Despite Daemon's attitudes, he was still a dragon rider of House Targaryen, riding the mighty Caraxes. However, a temporary exile was enough for Maekar, because, without Daemon, Viserys wasn't really a very great danger. Viserys was the typical man who was content with the status quo and didn't like to change many things. No one cared about Daemon's departure and the party continued normally. Some danced, others drank and ate. There were even those who drank too much and started some minor fights. Fortunately, some lords helped and the fights ended quickly. Maekar did what he did best: he talked to everyone, men or women. The prejudice they had against Maekar completely disappeared after this party. People would only remember him as Maekar, not as Maekar, Baelon's bastard son. It might seem like a tiny change, but it was certainly a big obstacle. Nobles didn't like bastards, even if Maekar was legitimized by Jaehaerys himself. Fortunately, this wasn't the era of the Blackfire rebellions, where prejudice against bastards would be infinitely greater. As he finished talking with a group of women, Maekar ignored the seemingly casual touches on his arms and glimpsed a figure in a purple dress alone in a corner, apparently drinking something. She was apparently talking to a very handsome bard, wearing colorful clothes. Maekar's smile wavered for a moment. He showed a cold look. If there was a flaw in Maekar, it was that, like every man who wanted to be king, he was the epitome of selfishness and possessiveness. Seeing Gale talking to another man didn't make him happy, especially with a bard, which reminded him of how his aunt died. "Miladies, forgive me, but I must excuse myself." Showing a charismatic and gentle smile to all the women around him, Maekar said before bidding farewell to the group of women. Gale, who was drinking a glass of juice while elegantly conversing with a bard, felt a little happy to have an exchange of musical knowledge with the bard. At the same time, he was handsome and spoke well, so she felt more comfortable in his presence, even though she was extremely shy. As she was about to ask the bard about a song, she saw a figure coming towards her. She looked more closely and realized it was Maekar wearing his beautiful exotic clothes. Seeing his violet eyes fixed on her, for some reason, Gale felt that Maekar was angry. No longer paying attention to the bard beside her, Gale showed a shy and sweet smile, remembering their morning conversation. She approached Maekar and asked in a gentle tone, "Are you enjoying the party, Maekar?" Maekar smiled and replied with a smile, "I'm having fun." The nobles were more receptive than expected. Maekar's violet eyes shifted from Gale and fell upon the bard. It was just a glance, but, faced with his cold and chilling gaze, the bard felt a shiver run down his body. He seemed to be inside a frozen cave before a pair of cold, murderous eyes. Seeing Maekar looking at the bard, Gale spoke cheerfully. "This is Cedric, the bard. He sang some songs at the party and was telling me about some curiosities from his travels through the Seven Kingdoms." "Oh, I'm curious too. Why don't you tell me some of your adventures as well?" Showing a gentle smile, Maekar asked with an amused and relaxed tone. But his gaze only intensified, becoming even colder than before. Swallowing hard, Cedric felt as if he were before King Jaehaerys. That cold and deep gaze would make anyone tremble. No, King Jaehaerys' gaze might be calm and deep, but it wasn't cold like the prince's before him. "I won't interrupt the conversation between the prince and princess," Cedric said in a dry tone and bowed. Without any hesitation, he quickly moved away. Even being a little naive, Gale felt that something invisible was happening between Maekar and the bard. She looked at Maekar with her beautiful eyes and asked in a soft tone, "Are you angry about something, Maekar?" "I wouldn't say I'm angry." Looking at Gale, Maekar replied in a calm tone, but looked at her with intensity and said in an equally soft tone, "I'm jealous." Seeing you talking to another man, laughing at his words, looking at him kindly, made me angry and want to cut off that bard's head. Gale's cheeks flushed the moment she heard those words. She lowered her head and didn't dare to look into Maekar's eyes. Touching her heart, she felt it beating faster than ever. She wasn't angry at Maekar's jealousy, she was even happy. It was a sweet and warm feeling she couldn't explain. Maekar was angry about her talking to another man, but it made him happy. In her eyes, it showed that he truly cared about her. "Don't be angry," she said, holding Maekar's arm. Gale looked at him and said in a gentle and sweet tone, "I was just curious about the landscapes and things he saw in the kingdom." Maekar looked at her, trying to calm him, and laughed. Gently holding her hand, he whispered, "Don't ask that kind of question again, I'll show you personally." Gale's eyes sparkled. Whether it was Jaehaerys or Alysanne, both never let her leave King's Landing. "You promise?" Almost like a child, Gale asked with a look full of expectation and longing for the outside world. "Yes, I promise." Showing a gentle smile, he nodded his head. Gale's eyes sparkled. She looked around and, seeing that no one was looking at them at that moment, stood on tiptoe and quickly kissed Maekar's cheek. Maekar looked at her and desperately suppressed the urge to kiss Gale at that moment. Showing a dangerous look to Gale, he just smiled. Gale, unaware that she had once again escaped the lion's clutches, only felt happier and shyer than ever. Chapter 14 The Prince and the Pale Princess 1. The next day, Maekar sat across from Alysanne and Gale with a calm expression while rubbing his forehead, feeling a massive headache. Despite managing to socialize with everyone at the party, the price was drinking liters and liters of wine. Fortunately, the wine of this world didn't have a high alcohol content, or he really would have passed out after the 20th glass. "Wine is good, but don't overdo it, Maekar," Alysanne said with a gentle smile. There was a hint of reprimand in her voice, but also a touch of affection that only a grandmother would have for her grandson. "I know, but it was necessary," Maekar said in a more comfortable tone, taking a sip of water. "Now everyone has recognized me as a prince." "Congratulations," Alysanne praised Maekar. She had seen firsthand how extraordinary the boy's charm was. In one night, he enchanted everyone so easily it was almost unbelievable. Alysanne never thought anyone was born to be king, but after seeing Maekar, she felt the gods truly had their favorites. Remembering something, Maekar looked at Gale and then at Alysanne with a smile. "Grandmother, I would like to kidnap your daughter for a tour of the kingdom's beautiful coastline." Alysanne was stunned by the request and looked at Maekar, then at Gale. Seeing her daughter lower her head shyly and then her grandson, who was smiling provocatively, she finally understood what was happening. "Go, but do not leave the continent," Alysanne spoke calmly as she brought a glass of juice to her lips. There was a smile on her face. Her eyes, full of wisdom, stared at Gale with a touch of amusement, making the princess blush deeply. "You heard her, princess. I'm kidnapping you, and no one can stop me," Maekar said with a seemingly villainous laugh, making Gale start to giggle and Alysanne crack a happy, relieved smile. Gale looked at Maekar with a happy gaze. She had expected him to keep the promise made the night before, but she didn't expect it to be so soon. Especially speaking right in front of her mother. It left her embarrassed and full of shyness, but that didn't hide the happiness she expressed at that moment. Seeing her daughter's lively and happy glow, Alysanne's gaze softened. She realized she had kept her daughter in a cage, preventing her from flying in the skies like the dragon she was destined to be. Remembering all her daughters, her gaze softened even more. Because of the deaths of her other daughters, she had never really let Gale stay away from her for long. "Have fun, dear," Alysanne said in a soft, gentle tone. "Don't worry about me and live your own life. I may be old, but my bones can still move on their own." Gale looked at her mother with teary eyes and realized her mother was having a misunderstanding. "I never thought you were a burden, mother. I always want to be by your side. I know, you've always been a strong girl." Of all Alysanne's daughters, Gale certainly wasn't the strongest, but she was the most resilient. Watching the scene between mother and daughter, Maekar couldn't help but remember his own mother, Cassandra. That woman wasn't gentle. She was a rigid woman who showed no tenderness in the punches she landed on his head, but it was certainly her way of showing her love for him. "Mother, I miss your fist of love," Maekar whispered while touching his head. He smiled, remembering the pain, but he would give anything to be able to feel that pain again. An iron carriage pulled by 4 black horses stopped in front of the dragon pit, and the door was opened. Maekar stepped down from the carriage and extended his hand, holding a delicate hand that emerged from the carriage door. Gale stepped down from the carriage, looking at the surroundings with a touch of curiosity. After seeing the pit, she was surprised. This place hasn't changed at all in 10 years. Maekar looked at her and found her reaction funny. House Targaryen had dragons, but the members of House Targaryen didn't want dragons. It was almost hilarious, as anyone else would kill their own parents to have a dragon in this world. As they say, some are born in Rome, others are born in some wild Germanic tribe. You never wanted a dragon? Holding her hand, Maekar asked in a curious tone. In his eyes, the idea of not having a dragon while being a Targaryen was worse than death. It was like being incomplete. That feeling had only grown stronger with the arrival of Bahamut. My mother took me to fly on Silverwing, but I fainted when the dragon took flight. Since then, my mother hasn't allowed me to claim a dragon. Showing an embarrassed look, Gale spoke in a soft tone. Honestly, Maekar understood Alysanne's concern. If Gale fainted on top of a dragon in the sky, the chances of something going wrong, even with a saddle, were high. Maekar began to think about how to make Gale become a dragon rider. Having 2 dragon riders was simply a massive power to hold. However, for that to happen, he had to see for himself if Gale had changed. Otherwise, having a dragon rider who faints from fright on top of a dragon was useless. It was like having an AK-47 without bullets. Don't worry, you're amazing, you can certainly fly a dragon like all Targaryens, Maekar spoke with a smile. He had more confidence in her than Gale had in herself. Looking at that warm smile and the gaze full of confidence, Gale squeezed Maekar's hand tighter. She didn't want to disappoint him, she wanted to show that she was also a Targaryen, just as Maekar said. Seeing the girl's gaze becoming a bit more determined and with a strength she didn't have before, Maekar smiled and brought Gale to the outer part of the dragon pit. He didn't let Bahamut enter the pit for obvious reasons. He didn't want to imprison his brother, much less chain him. He wasn't Daenerys, who was impressionable enough to lock her greatest weapons in one place. Thus, the two walked to the outer area, where dragons landed to enter and took off to fly with their riders. When Gale saw Bahamut, she opened her mouth and looked at the massive platinum dragon with golden hues in awe. How beautiful, he's huge, Maekar. Bahamut truly impressed anyone who saw him. He was enormous, and the platinum scales with golden tones made him the most majestic and sacred dragon. Don't praise him too much or he'll get arrogant, Maekar said with a laugh as he approached Bahamut. He touched the warm scales on the side of the dragon's face and smiled. He took Gale's hand and also had her touch the dragon's face. Gale showed fascination as she looked at the dragon and touched the warm scales. For the first time in her life, she regretted not having a dragon. Bahamut looked at Maekar and then at Gale. He snorted and sniffed the girl before reluctantly accepting being touched. Although the girl didn't have as pleasant a scent as his rider, she also had a decent smell. It seems he likes you, Maekar said, smiling. Gale also smiled and more tenderly stroked the beautiful platinum scales with golden hues at the edges. Come, climb up with me. Letting go of Gale's hand, Maekar said before starting to climb the iron netting and thick ropes that held the saddle. Just like Maekar, Gale wore leather pants and a black leather coat. She possessed a different charm in those clothes. The clothes perfectly outlined the princess's slender and delicate figure, adding a wilder and bolder charm to her. When Gale had completely climbed the network of steel cables and thick ropes, she was pulled up by Maekar and forced to sit in front of him in the saddle. Feeling the heat behind her and Maekar's breath on her neck, Gale showed a shy look. Maekar smiled at the reaction and fastened the belt around his and Gale's waists. Tightening the belt, he asked, whispering in her ear, "Is it tight enough?" Gale felt an electric current run through her body and couldn't help but look at Maekar with more shyness and a touch of resentment, as if blaming him for bullying her. An almost unbearable itch made her want to rub her legs, but she couldn't do that since she was in a saddle. "You know that looking at me like that makes me want to tease you even more," Maekar said with a laugh and gently kissed Gale's cheek. "You're mean, Maekar," Gale said with a look of anger, but with a touch of sweetness in her voice. "Hold on tight, we're going to fly," Maekar said with a laugh and patted Bahamut's long neck twice. Bahamut understood what Maekar wanted and rose into the air. The entire dragon trembled and shook, shaking the dust off his body. Gale was startled for a moment, but with Maekar's presence, she calmed down and became fascinated by the view from atop such a large dragon. Bahamut took a few steps forward before taking flight. At that same instant, Gale and Maekar were thrown back with force, but they didn't fall from the saddle because of the belt connected to 4 thick chains. The massive dragon quickly gained altitude and soared above King's Landing. The strong wind made Gale's and Maekar's hair flutter violently in the wind. RHUAAARGHHHHHHHHHHHH. A loud roar echoed above the city, announcing the presence of the mighty platinum and gold dragon. Chapter 15 The Prince and the Pale Princess 2. A colossal platinum dragon with golden hues at the edges of its scales emerged from the clouds with a powerful beat of its wings. The massive creature glided through the air with a grace and elegance completely disproportionate to its colossal body. Gale opened her arms and had never felt so free before. She discovered that the world was much more beautiful after leaving King's Landing. Looking around like a child, she gazed at the clouds with a hungry look. She brought her face close to the clouds and took a bite out of one. However, besides eating a few drops of water and getting her face wet, she tasted nothing. Witnessing the scene, Maekar began to laugh, guffawing for the first time in years. He wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes and smiled. He leaned in close to her and whispered playfully in her ear. Clouds are basically water droplets, you can't eat them. Gale's face was burning with so much embarrassment that she simply wanted to disappear at that moment. She knew Maekar would never stop teasing her after seeing what she tried to do with the cloud. By the way, if you don't want anyone to know, I'd better be bribed very well, Maekar added with a mischievous tone. Gale made a cute pout with her lips and looked at Maekar with resentment, but kissed Maekar's cheek again. Habit was a scary thing, even Gale didn't realize she was kissing Maekar so frequently. Suddenly, Gale felt her face being forced to look back, and under her wide eyes, Maekar simply claimed her lips in one swift motion. The kiss was simple, just the steady touch of lips with intensity. Leaving her soft and delicate lips, Maekar smiled and whispered in her ear. I'm a greedy man, a kiss on the cheek is far from satisfying my voracious appetite, my lovely princess. Gale looked at Maekar and lowered her head full of shyness, but she touched her lips, remembering the pleasant sensation of the kiss, and couldn't help but lick her lips, wanting more. Those lips were truly tempting, making her want more and more. At the same time, she never thought kissing was so. She finally understood why Alyssa was always kissing Baelon at the slightest opportunity. Noticing her own thoughts, Gale felt even more embarrassed, but blamed Maekar for making her think such immoral things. You mean dragon, she said with a tone of anger, but there wasn't a hint of anger in her intonation. Maekar narrowed his eyes and whispered again with a teasing tone. Don't pretend you didn't like it, I can see you want to taste my lips again. Gale glared at him and chose to ignore Maekar, but the red tips of her ears showed how embarrassed she was. Maekar didn't mind and just gently kissed her cheek while controlling Bahamut to fly toward a small island. As the massive dragon descended in altitude, Maekar was also enjoying the moment with Gale. Flying through the air with a dragon and a beautiful princess was truly something that calmed the mind. Of course, he knew this was the calm before the storm. Maekar knew that when he returned to King's Landing, he would officially begin his plan. So, he took this moment to completely relax. Before landing on the island's beach, Bahamut tilted his body back and flapped his wings hard, landing on the soft sand with a loud, heavy sound. The dragon lay on the ground and rested his head on the sand. Get down carefully. Maekar removed the belt that secured him and Gale to the saddle and spoke in a gentle tone. Gale nodded her head, and together with Maekar, both descended by the steel chains and thick ropes, finally touching the beach sand. What did we come to do on this island? Gale asked with curiosity, her eyes swept the surroundings like a child arriving at a new place. Relax, Maekar said with a smile as he sat in the shade of a coconut tree. He wanted a cold Coke, but unfortunately, this world didn't have that drink of the gods. I should have watched Dr. Stone more closely so I'd remember how to make Coca-Cola. Looking at the vastness of the sea, he murmured with a relaxed gaze while feeling the sea breeze. Gale sat beside him and also looked at the sea with a cheerful and relaxing gaze. It was the first time she had seen the sea so up close, and she was dazzled by its vastness and how beautiful it was. Thank you, Maekar. Looking at the boy beside her, Gale leaned against his shoulder and whispered in a gentle and happy tone. No need to thank me, you're a dragon, and a dragon should fly in the air to glimpse this beautiful world. Maekar stroked her soft hair and spoke in an equally gentle tone. Gale seemed like a kitten, enjoying the caresses on her hair. She practically leaned her whole body against Maekar and snuggled into his arms. She looked up and stared directly into his violet eyes. "If you bully me, I'll bite you," she said, baring her teeth with a threatening look on her face, or at least, that's what she thought she was doing. In Maekar's eyes, Gale was a white kitten trying to look like an imposing lioness. However, she failed miserably in her purpose. "It seems I have to discipline you," Maekar said with a smirk. In one swift motion, Gale's back was pressed against the sand, while she still looked at him with wide eyes. Under Gale's surprised eyes, Maekar began to tease her. He kissed her slender neck, then kissed her chin and moved up, claiming her lips in an intense kiss. Breaking the kiss for a moment to catch their breath, Maekar leaned his forehead against Gale's and said in a tone full of provocation. "Apparently, I'm going to tease you for a long time, my sweet princess." Gale, who was catching her breath after a long and lingering kiss, had flushed cheeks and was breathing heavily. She looked at Maekar and whispered with a touch of shyness, "You can tease me a little more." Maekar let out a laugh, finding her reaction adorable, and went back to kissing Gale with even more intensity. This time he even used his tongue. Honestly, Gale's kissing was inexperienced, she even bumped her teeth against his, but Maekar didn't mind and even found that sort of thing incredibly attractive. When their tongues separated after a long kiss, Maekar's and Gale's mouths were covered in saliva, and both were breathing heavily. Looking at Gale beneath him, Maekar realized the girl was strengthless and seemed to have no bones. She was just lying on the sand with a blurred and flushed expression. Her bright, innocent eyes now held a hint of lust. "You mean dragon," Gale said breathlessly. She was too weak even to move a finger, showing how crazy her experience had been. "Forgive me, but you were incredibly irresistible," Maekar said as he stroked her cheek with his finger. Gale turned her face to the side and, covering her face with her arm, whispered to Maekar, "If you make me feel even more amazing, I might reluctantly accept your apology." Maekar showed a smile and spoke in a husky tone, "What a greedy dragon, but I will obey, princess." The afternoon followed as Maekar expected. He and Gale kissed for a long time, bathed in the sea amidst Gale's laughter, and ate some fish that Maekar hunted with an improvised wooden spear. Honestly, he had never been so happy before, at least not since his mother's death. In the late afternoon, Gale was snuggled in Maekar's arms, while both were beneath one of Bahamut's wings. The heat emanating from the dragon's body made the environment warm and cozy. After a long silence, Gale looked at Maekar and asked in a worried tone, "Maekar, do you think my father will accept our union?" She was a princess of House Targaryen. The decision of her marriage was not in her hands, but in those of Jaehaerys, Gale's father and king. "It doesn't matter what he thinks." Maekar gave a laugh and hugged Gale tightly. "We can kidnap a Septon and fly to Dragonstone. By the time he arrives, we'll have already consummated the marriage, and you might be carrying my child," Maekar said with a mischievous smile. Just thinking about Jaehaerys' angry expression when he heard the news of the pregnancy was enough to make Maekar feel happy for years. After all, his daughter getting pregnant by the enemy could drive Jaehaerys mad with rage. Gale showed a shy look at the mention of the consummation of the marriage, but the image of a little Maekar running after her and calling her mother warmed her heart. "If he doesn't accept, we can do that," Gale said with a shy but expectant look. A woman in love is simply irrational and does not think with reason. Gale didn't care what the consequences of this act were, she only wanted to be with Maekar and nothing more. "Gale, you have to claim a dragon," Maekar said in a deep tone. "Even Jaehaerys cannot ignore the will of a dragonrider." Gale's eyes sparkled hearing Maekar's words. Yes, she had forgotten that. But, which dragon? Gale looked at Maekar, waiting for an answer from him. "Dreamfire, of course," Maekar said with a smile. Besides Silverwing, Dreamfire was practically the female dragon that had laid the most eggs for House Targaryen. How could he leave an adult and extremely fertile dragon in the hands of his future enemies? Although he felt sorry for the lovely and gentle Helena, Maekar had to fight for his future, and Gale, being Dreamfire's dragonrider, would only help him consolidate his power. Gale was very obedient and nodded her head, accepting Maekar's choice. Read the advanced chapters on my Patreon. Gots. To be continued.